Hey guys, tonight we are trudging into a journey that almost no one in their right mind would volunteer for. Yet here you are, wrapped in your blanket, eyes heavy, ears tuned in, as if you've agreed to join Hannibal himself on his ridiculous elephant-led hike over the Alps. The snow crunches under your sandals. Yes, sandals, not boots. And your breath comes out in plumes you can barely see against the white world swallowing you. All around, Carthaginian soldiers murmur in a language both sharp and melodic, and you're tucked in among them like an unwilling recruit who woke up on the wrong side of history. You probably won't survive this, but isn't that the fun of bedtime history? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, I'd love for you to drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. It's always fascinating to see this sleepy caravan stretch across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into the night's journey together. The mountain is not your friend. From the first step, it makes this abundantly clear. The path rises so sharply that your calves start complaining before you've even finished your first stretch. The air is crisp, too crisp, like it's been filtered through ice cubes instead of lungs. Each inhale feels clean and cruel at the same time. Hannibal rides ahead somewhere, maybe on a horse, maybe walking, maybe wrapped in a Carthaginian cloak so fine it almost laughs at your thin wool. Historians still argue whether Hannibal himself took the same narrow goat tracks his men did, or if he managed something slightly less suicidal. Either way, you're not reassured. Behind you, elephants snort clouds of steam, their massive feet crunching through snow like oversized pestles pounding mortar. The ground trembles under them, a constant reminder that if the Romans don't catch you, one misplaced elephant sneeze might. The soldiers joke that these animals are their secret weapon, though at the moment the only weapon they seem to wield is a trail of enormous dung piles, frozen solid but still dangerous for your balance. Everywhere you look, the landscape is trying to kill you. Sheer cliffs wait on your left, a yawning drop yawns harder on your right, rocks jut like broken teeth, and somewhere above, snow threatens to peel away at any moment. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's chosen route was a northern alpine pass or a southern one, but really, it doesn't matter to you, because either way, you're trudging into the jaws of a mountain that never signed up for peace talks. The camp behind you already feels like a dream. A warm fire, thin soup made from whatever grain hadn't spoiled yet, and the illusion of safety. Out here there's no soup, no warmth, just the ragged breathing of hundreds of men hoping the next turn won't be their last. You catch sight of one soldier pressing his lips to a charm on his necklace. Another mutters prayers in a language older than the Alps themselves. And you, well, you just keep walking, because if you stop, the soldier behind you might shove you forward without even meaning to. The wind picks up. It slips down your collar like cold fingers, brushing against your ribs and spine. It whistles through the gaps in rocks, creating notes that sound suspiciously like a funeral dirge. You try to laugh at that, but your lips are too numb. The soldiers laugh, though, at stranger things. One man swears the wind is actually the mountain talking. Another insists that the Romans have found a way to whistle curses from miles away. You wonder if Romans really needed to, when all they had to do was wait for gravity, ice, and exhaustion to do their work. There's a strange comfort in the rhythm of your steps. Left, right, snow creaks, elephants groan, men mutter. Your world narrows into these sounds like a lullaby you can't quite turn off. And in the back of your mind, a nagging thought circles. This isn't even the hardest part yet. Historians still argue whether more men died climbing up the Alps or sliding down them, but you'd bet your last frozen fig that both sides of the mountain were equally eager to claim lives. Your stomach growls, reminding you that dinner was little more than a lump of barley mash shared among three. You imagine the soldiers of Rome sitting in their sturdy camps, gnawing on bread and meat. Then again, Roman bread was notoriously dense, so maybe you'd be gnawing for hours, like chewing on a brick. Still, a brick sounds more satisfying than chewing on your own leather belt, which you notice some soldiers already trying. Up ahead, Hannibal raises a hand. The column halts, boots and sandals grinding to a reluctant stop. You squint into the icy glare and spot the faint curve of the path zigzagging upward. It looks impossible. It looks worse than impossible. You let out a sigh that fogs the air in front of you. The soldier next to you says something in Carthaginian, probably a complaint about the incline. You don't need a translation. You both know you're about to suffer. And so you climb. Again, always up, always forward. Because the alternative is sliding back into Roman chains, and if there's one thing you're certain about, it's that no one survives being caught as Hannibal's prey. The elephants loom closer now, their massive forms casting dark shadows even in this blinding snow. You fall into step beside one for a while, just to marvel at the absurdity of the situation. A creature born for African plains, sunlit rivers, and swaying palms now trudges beside you, tusks rimed with frost. Its ears flap slowly, half-frozen curtains, while its trunk swings like an exhausted metronome. You wonder who looks more out of place, the elephant on a mountain, or you, half-starved and bundled in rags, pretending you belong in Hannibal's grand campaign. Historians still argue whether Hannibal really brought 37 elephants or fewer, and whether they were African forest elephants or the larger Indian kind. Scholars pore over bone fragments, coin images, and ancient texts, but you're less concerned with taxonomy and more with the ground trembling under each step. The sheer weight of the animal makes you think the path might crumble, plunging both of you into the abyss. The Carthaginian soldiers treat these beasts like both comrades and burdens. One soldier reaches up to pat the wrinkled hide as if to reassure himself that the creature hasn't vanished into the snow. Another swears the elephants understand commands whispered in Phoenician, though when he says forward and the beast stops to sneeze violently, the men laugh with a tired kind of hysteria. You can't help but chuckle too, even though a sneeze from something weighing 6 tons is less cute and more like a small avalanche waiting to happen. The elephants are more than mascots. They're symbols of defiance. Hannibal knows it. The Romans know it. Even you, teeth chattering, know it. The sight of one of these beasts cresting an alpine ridge would send shivers down any Roman spine. At least that's the idea. Right now, though, it's just sending shivers through your own spine because you're walking behind the tail end and you realize elephants don't stop producing reminders of their presence, even in sub-zero weather. You dodge a frozen clump just in time and make a mental note. Surviving Hannibal's Alps also means surviving Hannibal's elephants. Night draws nearer and the beasts grow restless. You hear a trumpet blast echo between cliffs, a deep resonant sound that makes the snow shiver loose from an overhead ledge. Everyone freezes, craning upward, half expecting an avalanche. It doesn't come this time. Instead, the elephants shuffle nervously, their massive bodies pressing closer together as if they too fear the mountain. You think about it. If something that large and ancient is afraid, maybe you should be terrified. One soldier leans in close, whispering an odd tidbit. He swears that the elephants wear bronze-studded shoes on long marches. You laugh it off, picturing some poor blacksmith trying to nail sandals onto elephant feet, but the soldier insists he's seen it. Historians still argue about this detail, whether it's fact or fable, but right now, you don't care. You just want your own shoes to last one more day without falling apart. Food grows scarcer. Soldiers argue over who gets to forage the brush at the edge of the path. You scrape snow away, find nothing but dead twigs, and sigh. Meanwhile, the elephants keep eating. They strip branches, crunch bark, and somehow manage to stay alive where men falter. You envy their stubbornness. One soldier jokes that if things get worse, Hannibal might start carving steaks from the elephants themselves. The laughter that follows is thin, nervous, the kind that dies quickly in the frosty air. You can feel eyes on you, the Romans behind, the Alps above, the Carthaginians beside, and the elephants towering over. Prey is what you are, no matter where you turn. The Romans chase you, the mountain tests you, and even the animals threaten to outlast you. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's bold gamble was brilliance or madness. You personally are leaning toward madness. As night finally falls, the camp is a scatter of fire struggling against wind. The elephants huddle near, their hulking forms blocking some of the gales. For once, you're grateful for their bulk. You lie down on frozen ground, pulling your cloak tight, and listen. Somewhere, a soldier hums a lullaby. Somewhere else, another man coughs the harsh cough of frost in his lungs. The elephants rumble softly, low and mournful, like drums in the dark. You close your eyes, knowing tomorrow you'll rise and walk again beside these impossible creatures, through a landscape designed to break both man and beast, and you remind yourself with a small wry smile you couldn't survive being Hannibal's prey, but here you are, still trying anyway. The campfire crackles low, and you draw your thin cloak closer around your shoulders. The smoke stings your eyes, but you don't dare move farther from the warmth. Carthaginian soldiers gather in small knots around their own flickering flames, voices blending in the hush of many languages. Some pray aloud to Baal Haman or Tanit, their words rising and falling like waves. Others mutter curses about the cold, or about Hannibal's impossible scheme. You sit quietly, half listening, half dozing, until one soldier slides over and nudges you with a grin. He offers a handful of roasted barley, charred and bitter, but food nonetheless. The mood around the fire shifts with every gust of wind. One moment there's laughter, a man telling a story about a crocodile back in Carthage that allegedly swallowed a whole goat. The next moment, silence smothers the group when a trumpet call echoes faintly from the darkness, reminding everyone that Romans aren't far behind. You try to reassure yourself that the sound is only an elephant shifting in its sleep, but no one quite believes it. You glance around and realize how foreign this company really is. Carthaginians, Libyans, Numidians, Iberians. This isn't one army, it's a patchwork quilt stitched together with coin, loyalty, or sheer desperation. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's true genius lay in tactics or in the charisma to hold such a varied force together. Tonight, as snow swirls beyond the fire's reach, you lean toward charisma, because without it, everyone might simply walk away. A soldier sitting across from you pulls out something strange, a pouch of herbs and dried figs. He swears that chewing this mix keeps the cold from creeping into your bones. You take a piece, crunch down, and discover it tastes like bitter dust with a hint of sweetness. The others chuckle at your grimace. Better than chewing your sandals, one says, and you have to admit he's right. This odd little snack is one of those quirky remedies that keep spirits alive, if not bodies. The fire burns lower, sparks rise, carried by the wind into the starless dark. You tilt your head back, squinting at the sky. No moon tonight, only thick clouds pressing down like a heavy lid. It feels suffocating. The man beside you whispers about predators in the night, wolves that can strip a body in minutes, or mountain spirits that lure men to their deaths. Another swears he saw a figure earlier, a shadow gliding between rocks, too tall to be man, too graceful to be beast. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's men actually faced alpine tribes lurking in ambush, or if fear magnified every shifting shadow. For now, the whispers are enough to send your heart pounding faster. The fire dwindles. You lie back on hard ground, your bones aching, and try to relax. Easier said than done. Every sound feels magnified. A twig snapping, an elephant rumbling, a man's cough breaking the fragile silence. You wonder if tonight will be the night the Romans strike, swooping down the mountain paths to scatter you like startled goats. Then again, maybe it will be wolves instead, eyes glowing in the dark, circling patiently, waiting for the weakest to falter. Sleep comes reluctantly. It wraps you not in warmth, but in exhaustion. Dreams blur with reality. You imagine a Roman sword glinting in the firelight, only to realize it's a fellow soldier adjusting his spear. You dream of elephants charging through snow, their massive shapes ghostly and endless, only to wake at dawn with your heart still hammering. The first light creeps into camp, a cold gray wash that reveals what the night has taken. A man lies stiff, his breath gone in the night. Another limps, toes blackened with frostbite. The fire has burned down to ashes, useless now. You stand groggy, and realize the chase hasn't paused at all, only you have briefly, in sleep. Hannibal calls the men to march, and once again you rise, one among thousands, trudging forward through the Alps. And you think, not for the first time, that surviving Hannibal's campaign might mean surviving not just the enemy, but the endless nights by the fire, where shadows move and whispers make prey of your imagination. You begin to climb again, higher and higher, where the air thins and every breath feels like it costs you something. Your chest tightens and each inhale burns colder than the last. Snowflakes sting your cheeks like tiny needles, and the path ahead zigzags upward in cruel switchbacks. Behind you, the column stretches endlessly, men, mules, and elephants trudging step after weary step. The mountain looms above, as if daring you to continue, and you wonder what lunacy persuaded you to march into its jaws. The slope grows steeper, rocks jut out from the white crust, slick with ice. One slip would send you tumbling into the abyss below, and you notice how every soldier clings to the wall with one hand, while gripping a spear or staff with the other. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's route was over the Col de la Traversette or another alpine pass, but standing here, the exact geography feels irrelevant. Whichever pass it was, it's trying to swallow you alive. A sudden rumble interrupts your thoughts. Far above, snow shears loose and tumbles downward, not a full avalanche, but enough to scatter men and beasts alike. You flatten yourself against the cold stone wall as powder and ice cascade past, coating you head to toe. Your teeth chatter, partly from the chill, partly from the realization that avalanches don't need permission. They can strike any time, anywhere. One soldier mutters that the mountain is alive, shaking you off like fleas. Another swears he saw a figure start the slide deliberately, an alpine tribesman sending a message. You can't tell if he's joking or trembling. The climb becomes so narrow you're forced into single file. The elephants, impossibly, are coaxed along too, their handlers guiding them with sharp cries and prods. The beasts trumpet their unease, and you feel the vibrations in your bones. You try not to look down, but curiosity betrays you. There's nothing beneath but a white blur and a sense of endless falling. You gulp and push forward, reminding yourself that dizziness here is as deadly as any Roman spear. A strange detail catches your attention. Some men rub snow on their faces deliberately, claiming it keeps them alert. Others argue it blinds them faster. Historians still argue whether snow blindness was a common ailment for Hannibal's army. But as you squint into the glare, eyes watering, you're certain the danger is real. Every shimmer on the ice seems to hide a crack, a hole, or a trap. Your stomach growls, but you barely notice it anymore. Hunger is becoming a dull background hum, just another note in the symphony of pain. The real enemy here is exhaustion. Your legs wobble, your knees shake, and still Hannibal drives the column onward. You glance up and, for a fleeting moment, catch sight of him. Cloaked, rigid, eyes scanning the path like a hawk's. It's strange comfort, knowing the general himself suffers this climb too, or at least appears to. Some whisper that Hannibal has better rations tucked away, that his boots are lined with fleece. Others insist he eats no more than a common soldier and wears thin leather like the rest. Historians still argue which version is true, but up here, rumors feel like survival tools, stories to keep your feet moving. The wind changes, colder, sharper, carrying with it an eerie silence. You realize you can't hear the valley anymore, can't hear birds, can't hear anything but the creak of ice and the grunt of men. It's as if the mountain has swallowed sound itself. You want to crack a joke about the world's worst amphitheater, but your lips are too frozen to bother. When you finally stop for rest, it's not by choice. The column halts because the path ahead has collapsed into nothing, an ice shelf that gave way long ago, leaving only a sheer drop. Engineers scramble forward, trying to hack out a new path with picks and torches, their shouts thin against the white expanse. You sit on your pack, shivering, and try not to imagine spending the night stranded here. A soldier beside you fiddles with a die carved from bone, rolling it in his palm, muttering that his luck hasn't run out yet. You half wish he'd pass it to you. As the men work, the elephants sway nervously, their weight a threat on such fragile footing. You study them again, wondering if they too question their chances. You almost envy their ignorance, or maybe it's wisdom, to keep moving forward no matter what. Hours later, the path is cleared just enough to squeeze across. You force yourself upright, legs stiff, heart pounding. One by one, you cross the scar of missing ground, not looking down, not breathing, until your boots find solid rock again. When you finally make it across, a sigh escapes you, long and shaky. But the climb doesn't end here. The path keeps rising, always upward. always toward a summit that never seems to arrive. You trudge on, realizing that each step is a bargain struck with the mountain. You'll give it pain, hunger, and fear, and in return, it will let you live, at least until tomorrow. Night falls like a lid, snug and heavy, and the mountain turns the color of old iron. The last rose smudge of sunset slips behind a serrated ridge, and the cold becomes a thing with fingers. You pull your cloak tighter and realize that in daylight, you are only exhausted. In darkness, you are officially prey. The column's chatter thins to careful whispers. Even the elephants lower their heads, as if ducking beneath the dark. Their breath floods out in slow white rivers. Somewhere in the black, something else breathes back. The handlers light pitch torches, pine resin blubbering with a greasy glow. The flames hiss when stray snowflakes land, and that faint sizzle is the only joke the weather tells tonight. The light throws cramped ovals onto the path, useful for the next 3 steps and no more. Everything beyond that is rumor. Your sandals thud, crunch, and each sound feels too loud, as if you're belting a solo in a very exclusive concert for wolves. A Numidian scout gestures, quiet. He taps 2 fingers to his eyes and points to a notch in the cliff. You squint and think you see a shadow unstick itself from the rock, then settle back again like a bat folding its wings. Ancient writers talk about alpine tribes, raiders who know every goat track and avalanche tongue up here. Polybius swears they ambushed Hannibal in narrow defiles. Livy adds spice, as Livy tends to do. That's the mainstream fact you tuck into your pocket for warmth. Hannibal's army, 218 BCE, crossing into a neighborhood unfriendly on purpose. Historians still argue whether those tribes were the Centrones, the Allobroges, or someone your tongue can't pronounce at this altitude, and they also argue whether the worst ambush came during ascent or on the first terrifying descent. The consensus, such as it is, agrees on one point. Strangers at night make excellent targets. You step softer. The path has narrowed again, a ribbon of ice stitched to the cliff. A rope handrail droops here and there, frozen into sagging smiles. Your torch paints your fingers gold, then blue again when the wind blows the flame away from you. Ahead, a mule brays. Behind, an elephant gives a low, seismic purr, the kind of sound that says, "I could crush a cottage," in a very gentle voice. If you had a cottage, you'd willingly trade it for a decent pair of socks. Joke 1 for the hour. You could also trade it for an elephant that doubles as a windbreak, though you suspect the elephant union charges extra for that service. Someone coughs. The cough ricochets between rock faces and comes back twice as large. You flinch. Off to the side, snow trembles on a ledge and dribbles down like powdered sugar. The Numidian scout melts forward again, touches the ledge, licks a finger, and nods. You're not sure what he's learned. Mineral content, Roman seasoning, but it calms him, so you let it calm you. Quirky tidbit of the night. The man beside you swears that rubbing a little garlic on your sandals keeps mountain spirits away and persuades wolves you're a walking kitchen. You try not to imagine a wolf writing a 5-star review. Aromas excellent, portions meager. The wind brings a new sound, thin as thread. A whistle not made by rock or storm. The column stops as if a hand pressed pause. You hold your breath with everyone else. This is the human part of the predator list. Raiders know the dark better than you, and they know you know that. Somewhere above, a rock ticks against another, the way a pebble does when a foot dislodges it. A Carthaginian officer murmurs in Punic, and spears tip upward like reeds leaning into current. You wish you could melt into your cloak, become a pile of wool and uncertainty. For now, you stand very still, pretending to be geology. Minutes pass, or maybe 3 hours. Time slips on the ice same as your feet. Then, from the far flank, a torch flares and fizzles. Someone signaled, someone answered, or someone simply failed at lighting tinder with frozen fingers. The column moves again, but slower, tighter. The elephants are urged to the center. Their handlers murmur lullabies, words that sound like river water and distant palms. You catch, "Shh, great one." And for a heartbeat, the Alps feel like a fever dream. In Africa, the thing you could touch if you closed your eyes hard enough. Wolves announce themselves the way fashionable dinner guests do. Late, unbothered, and already fully informed. The first howl coils from low in the valley, then another threads it from above. Your stomach does a small gymnastic routine. The handler nearest you says not to worry. Wolves prefer the fallen, the separated, the careless. You do a brisk mental inventory, not fallen, not separated, extremely careful. He adds that singing helps. Someone starts a tune, a Carthaginian marching song flattened into a humming drone, and others join, the sound quiet and stubborn as a stubborn candle. If the wolves are critics, they keep their reviews to themselves. You pass a place where the path kinks around a boulder and squeezes to nothing. Men turn sideways and inch along, hugging stone. Below, not much. Only a silky darkness that invites you to consider falling as a lifestyle. That's when sling stones nick the rock. Tack, tack. Then one pings off a shield with a metallic pop. The officer doesn't shout. He waves and two shields tilt, overlapping like scales. The formation changes shape without breaking the hush. You realize the army has a nighttime skin and a daytime skin, and this one fits more tightly. A javelin arcs into the void, the thrower guessing at a shape. No cry comes back. Possibly he hit snow. Possibly he tagged a very surprised boulder. The attack doesn't blossom, it frays. A dart here, a pebble there, the kind of harassment that takes your sleep instead of your blood. That might be the point. The raiders don't need to destroy you. Gravity is already on their payroll. Historians still argue whether Hannibal countered such harassment with bribes, sudden counter ambushes, or sheer velocity, but tonight, the tactic is simpler. Keep moving until the mountain runs out of dark. When the path widens, the army opens like a fist unclenching. Fires spark, miserly, blue-tongued, and determined. Men squat close, hands hovering. An elephant kneels with a thud, a cathedral resigning itself to prayer. Someone passes a skin of wine and a pouch of bitter herbs. The peppery fig mix you've tried before, still heroic in its mediocrity. You rub your hands and take a sip. It tastes like courage that has seen better days. You lean your shoulder to a pack, and from somewhere to your left a storyteller begins, because armies run on tales when the rations shrink. He tells of a passage where men drilled steps into the ice with vinegar and heat, taming a slope with kitchen supplies. You've heard that one, Livy again perhaps, an image too vivid not to repeat. Men hissing vinegar on a frozen wall, like cranky bakers scolding a stubborn loaf. Historians still argue whether that's engineering, exaggeration, or both. You prefer both. It gives you something to grin at while your toes attempt to secede. A wolf pads close enough that your torch finds eyes. 2 green coins, then gone. You exhale slowly, the way the scouts do. You think about the Romans somewhere behind, polishing sandals, straightening lines, pretending to be order, while the mountains practice chaos. The chase is still on, it never stopped. It is the night's true weather. Joke 2 arrives with a yawn. If the mountain had a lost and found, it would be full of sandals, pride, and one very confused goat. As the fire sinks to embers, your head nods. You are not asleep, you are merely auditioning for it. A hand bumps your shoulder, and the officer whispers, "Second watch." You rise, stiff as an old door, and take your place at the edge of camp. The world is charcoal and frost. You listen to snow sighing on branches, men muttering in dreams, and an elephant snoring an octave lower than thunder. Joke 3 writes itself. You have never envied an animal's sleep so much, and yes, you would accept its blanket if the blanket is the size of a sail. You look into the dark and admit the truth out loud, but softly so it doesn't carry. You are prey. Prey that walks and sings and makes soup when it can. Prey with a general who insists the far side of the mountains is worth this nightly audition with fear. Somewhere out there, the Romans pace too, and wolves make their rounds, and the raiders tally your fires. The torch sputters, the wind shifts. You steady your breath, make it long and slow, and let the mountain listen to you instead. You plan to survive the next 10 paces. After that, you'll negotiate. Hunger arrives with the dawn and refuses to leave. It doesn't knock. It kicks the door in, raids the cupboards, and leaves a complaint with management. Your belly feels like a small, unhappy drum, beating time to the march. Around you, men move carefully, as though any sudden gesture might jostle a meal loose from thin air. The fires cough up their last breath. No pot simmering, no barley burbling, only a blackened ring and a hopeful smell that might be yesterday's memory. You stand, swaying a little, and the world tilts like a bowl someone forgot to fill. Rations have dwindled to rumor. The pack animals eat first because they are legs with stomachs, and without legs, the army is just a pile of excellent intentions. Someone divides a palmful of grain 7 ways. The kernels click in your teeth like sand. You swill a mouthful of sour water, wine stretched to a blush and then kept stretching. That's not unusual. Ancient armies often drank watered wine or vinegar water to cut the taste of questionable barrels. But today, the thin liquid does nothing except teach your stomach new words. Mainstream fact to keep you company. Polybius reports that by the time Hannibal reached Italy in 218 BCE, he'd lost a brutal chunk of men and horses to cold, hunger, and ambush. You look at your breath fogging the air and think, yes, that tracks. Someone produces the peppery fig and herb mix again, heroic in its mediocrity. It's gone in moments. A Numidian trooper gnaws a strip of leather like it owes him money. You watch, appalled, then curious. He shrugs, dunks the strap in hot water, and lets it soften, the way you might coax tenderness from a stubborn root. You copy him. The broth tastes faintly of tannin and old decisions, but your jaws are grateful for the work. Joke 1 writes itself. Congratulations. You have discovered the world's first 0-star tasting menu. Notes of sandal, finish of disappointment. A few men swear by tricks, sucking a pebble to keep saliva flowing, chewing pine resin like gum to shut the stomach up, tucking a snowball into the cheek to trick the mouth into thinking it's busy. The resin tastes like a pine tree scolding you, and the snowball grants you 5 minutes of heroic numbness. Quirky tidbit you file away. One soldier sprinkles charcoal flakes into water to settle the belly. An idea learned from a healer who swore it cleans bad airs. You don't know if it's medicine or theater, but the little black specks make the drink look interesting, which is something. Every conversation bends toward food and then pretends it didn't. Iberian slingers murmur about home olives fat as thumbs. A Libyan cavalryman describes dates so sweet they squeak against the teeth. You swear you can smell both, drifting over the snow like a dream Hannibal forgot to pack. Elephants crunch twigs with enviable focus. A handler pats one's cheek and says softly that bark is good for winter teeth. You note the detail like a jealous neighbor peeking over the fence. If you had teeth that could eat bark, you'd be a well-fed legend. Historians still argue whether Hannibal arranged supply depots with Gallic allies before the ascent or relied almost entirely on foraging and speed. Either way, the Alps are terrible business partners. The scouts return with faces pinched and baskets emptier than philosophy. One man has a fistful of something that might be juniper and might be a story, and the cooks lean over it like priests over a relic. In the end, there is thin broth for 6 and hopeful steam for everyone else. You take the steam. The march resumes, because hunger is not the kind of problem that improves when you sit down. Your legs feel hollow, like reeds having a complicated day. The path ripples along a ridge and the snow squeaks underfoot in that cheerful way snow has when it knows you're tired. Your thoughts move slower, then faster, then sideways. You see a fig in the sky, perfectly ripe, until it becomes the sun again. A pale disc, more suggestion than heat. Joke 2 staggers in on cue. If the mountain offered a prefix lunch, it would be 1 course, wind, and it would still run out. A Carthaginian officer produces a little pouch from inside his cloak. He taps out grains, barley, spelt, and crushes them with the butt of his knife, then mixes the paste with snow in his palm and swallows it. Keeps me walking, he says. Eyes so matter of fact, you almost believe the Alps were invented for this snack. You attempt the same alchemy. The paste is earnest and melancholy. It gets you 500 steps. By midday, your senses play tricks. The leather strap in your pack whispers your name like a soap opera villain. You pretend not to hear. Men begin to narrate fantasies. The market at New Carthage, a stall with warm flatbread, a wedge of goat cheese so rich you could retire on it. A veteran cuts through the reverie with a practical lecture on Pascha, the sour drink Roman infantry favors. He swears it tames thirst and stomach in one go. Another man grunts that Roman recipes can stay with Romans. Everybody laughs, because it's funny, and because laughing is a kind of chewing. You pass a stand of stunted pines, slumping under snow like tired giants. The scouts harvest needles. The cook insists on a forest tea, a handful of green boiled in a blackened pot. Whether it adds anything but optimism's a live question, but the steam smells alive. You close your eyes and let it paint warmth on your face. Someone mutters a blessing to Tanit. Someone else to a household god smuggled in a pocket charm. You cross yourself onto your own ribs. Not a ritual you know, but one the day seems to ask. The Romans remain a pressure at your back, invisible and undeniable. A rider shows a shuttered lantern, 3 quick blinks from a far ridge, their scouts, or a trick of light, or your hunger staging theater. Either way, the column tightens. You move downhill a dozen paces and up again 20, a grim economy that never balances. The elephants leave plate-sized moons in the snow. One slips heart-achingly, then steadies with a groan, and the whole army exhales. You want to feed it your share of everything for a week, but your share has already been eaten by the idea of it. When the halt finally comes, it's not a full stop. It's the kind of pause you'd get if the day rubbed its eyes. Fires bloom, stingily. The cooks pass around a pot whose chief ingredient is boiled hope. An Iberian cuts the fringe off his cloak, the part least essential to dignity, and dunks it in the broth to leach out the dye and gather what's left of the flavor. You test a corner of your own strap again and decide that dignity is a very flexible fabric. Joke 3, bows gracefully. You are now a connoisseur of umami leather, with tasting notes of once guarded a sword, now guards your survival. Someone brings news, a small cache ahead, maybe a forgotten goat pen, maybe a trader's shed. The words strike like sparks. You rise with the column, each man taller by 2 crumbs of hope. The wind fingers your hair like a distracted barber. The march is quieter now, a soft insistence. You tell your stomach a bedtime story. On the far side, there are chestnuts and warm bread and bowls that remember how to be full. Your stomach listens like a child promised spring. Night will come again with its wolves and whispers. For now, you put one foot down, then the other, and let hunger become part of the rhythm, a drum that keeps time rather than a thief in your tent. You chew what you can, imagine what you must, and walk inside a promise you've borrowed from Hannibal himself, that the far side is real enough to starve for. The scouts whisper again, and this time their words stiffen every spine in the column. Romans, always Romans. Not here, not in sight, but near enough that men glance backward more often than forward, like children convinced the bogeyman finally bought good shoes. The news slithers through the ranks. Their legions are shadowing the march, following the carcasses, the ash, the trampled snow. You can almost hear the sandaled tread behind you, steady, smug, inevitable. Hannibal's army knows it's being hunted, and in your bones, you know you are prey. The general doesn't falter. You see him once, far ahead on a rise, silhouetted against the hard light, cloak snapping, arm lifted, eyes scanning the valley like he owns the mountain. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's genius was sheer speed, crossing so fast the Romans couldn't choke him off, or whether he thrived on psychological games, letting them know he was near but untouchable. Either way, right now, the thought of Romans pacing just beyond vision feels like a slow chase scene stretched across the sky. The elephants sense it too. Their trunks rise, curling like question marks as though scenting enemies. They grumble deep in their chests, and you feel it in your ribs. Their handlers shush them like fretful children, murmuring prayers. But the men are restless as well. Some joke, thin and brittle, perhaps the Romans brought bread. Another adds, perhaps they brought beds. No one laughs very hard. You step carefully on the icy trail, ears straining for sound. A pebble skips behind you, not close, just close enough. You whip your head around, but there is only snow in the endless line of weary men. Was it a Roman scout? Or a chunk of ice startled loose? Historians still argue whether Hannibal's march was tracked so closely that skirmishes nipped constantly at his rear guard. You don't have to argue. You can feel it in your spine. The path tightens again, this time through a throat of rock where the cliffs lean like arguing giants. Echoes bounce oddly. A cough ricochets into a roar. The man in front of you mutters that he hates narrow places. They feel like traps. He's not wrong. You glance upward, half expecting sling stones or arrows to rain down, but nothing comes, not yet. When you halt for rest, the column breathes as one. Long sighs, boots scuffing, elephants stamping frost-numb feet. Men fall onto their packs, too tired even to shiver. You sit too, watching the mist from your breath mingle with the steam from your neighbors. The hunger is still there, gnawing, but now it makes room for fear to sit at the same table. Together, they are an excellent team, chewing through your resolve. Quirky tidbit, one soldier insists that wolves trail armies not for scraps, but because they believe men drive deer ahead of them. To the wolves, you are unpaid hunting dogs. You try not to picture it, though part of you thinks it's accurate. Romans behind, wolves beside, mountain ahead. You are the meat in history's strangest sandwich. Joke one of the day. At this rate, the only condiment you'll get is snow. You shuffle onward when the horns call again. The line snakes higher, into thinner air, where your head feels as light as a gourd. Your ears buzz. You keep imagining footsteps right behind you, too close, too real. Sometimes it is just your own echo, sometimes it isn't. Once you glimpse a flicker of bronze glint far down the trail, a momentary flash before it vanishes behind snow. Romans, tribesmen, or your eyes betraying you? The uncertainty gnaws worse than hunger. You try to steady yourself with memory. You recall Hannibal's speeches, fiery in the valleys before the climb, promising that glory waited in Italy, that Rome itself would tremble. You wonder if glory will notice you when you freeze solid on some nameless ridge. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's men truly believed in his vision or merely followed out of fear and pay. You lean toward the latter, though a spark of stubbornness still drags your boots forward. As the day wears thin, the clouds press lower, smothering the peaks. The snow grows heavier, and the trail dissolves into whiteness. You march inside a foggy world where sound dulls and everything feels closer. It's almost peaceful, until you hear that pebble again. Skitter, skip, bounce, always behind, always a half step too late to catch. Night finally comes, and the fires are set in small clusters. No singing tonight, no cheerful talk of figs or olives. Men crouch, listening. Even the elephants are restless, rocking in place. Somewhere in the dark, the Romans camp too, their fires hidden, their patience endless. You lie awake, staring at the stars clawing through the clouds, and you know the chase hasn't ended. It never will, not until the Alps decide who survives. Joke 2 drifts into your head like a sleepy thought. If this is a game of tag, you wish you hadn't been born it. The column strings itself out again, long and fragile as a thread of ants on a dinner plate, inching through a pass so narrow you wonder if even air has to squeeze sideways. The cliff on your left bulges toward you, damp with frozen seepage. The drop on your right disappears into whiteness. You press your shoulder into the rock, feeling grit bite your cloak. Every step is a contract with gravity, signed in silence. The trail tilts inward here, just enough that the pack animals hesitate. Mules balk, hooves scrabbling. A handler shouts, slaps the lead rope, and the beast lurches forward, nearly dragging its neighbor off the edge. Men shout, curse, pray. One Iberian soldier leans too far and nearly follows the mule, but a comrade yanks him back by the collar. He gasps, half laughing, half sobbing, almost joined the valley. Joke 1 arrives in your head. There's no quicker way to descend the Alps than as luggage. The elephants, impossibly, must pass too. Their handlers coax them with murmurs, whistles, and the occasional spear butt jab. One steps onto the ledge, huge foot spreading like a snowshoe. You flatten yourself against the wall as the mountain shakes. The beast inches forward, tail twitching. The cliff groans with the weight of history itself. You swear the ledge bends. And yet, step by lumbering step, the impossible continues. Mainstream fact to steady your nerves. Polybius describes how Hannibal's army crossed passes where men had to carve footholds out of sheer ice just to continue. Historians still argue whether this particular stretch was the infamous traversette, where the path narrowed to goat width, or another pass equally hostile. Either way, you feel the truth with every quivering stone under your sandals. Suddenly, the ledge narrows to a handspan. Men flatten sideways, pressing chest to cliff, inching their feet like dancers who forgot the steps. A mule slips, hindquarters skidding. It brays, thrashes, then tumbles. The sound is a cut-off scream that fades into nothing. Silence presses down after, heavier than the snow. No one speaks. No one looks down. You shuffle forward, heart hammering, pretending you've never heard the word gravity. Quirky tidbit. A soldier near you mutters that some men smear resin on their soles to grip ice, like homemade cleats. He demonstrates, sticking to the ledge with unnerving confidence. You wish you had resin. Instead, you have sweaty palms and a prayer to gods you don't usually dial. Halfway across, the wind hits. It barrels through the notch like an angry guest, shoving at cloaks, rattling spears, plucking at elephants' ears. You crouch, hugging the cliff. Snow lifts, blinding, and the ledge seems to vanish beneath you. A Carthaginian officer bellows, but the gale shreds his words. Still, the men cling. The elephants hunker. The column waits it out. Minutes stretch into small eternities until just as suddenly, the gust dies. You peel yourself from the rock, trembling. Joke 2 tries to lighten the mood. Congratulations. You've just reenacted the world's least enjoyable waltz, partnered with a cliff. The column squeezes through, one survivor at a time. When your boots finally find wider ground, your knees nearly collapse from relief. You slump against a boulder, gulping air, eyes stinging from snow glare. Others stagger too, laughing shakily. One man kisses the ground. Another mutters that he's done with mountains forever. You believe him. But the Alps aren't done with you. Ahead, the path curls upward again, vanishing into a fold of white and gray. Scouts return with worried faces. They claim to have glimpsed figures higher up. Tribesmen, maybe Romans, maybe snow ghosts. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's greatest threat in the passes was the terrain itself or the men waiting in ambush. Watching the scouts' faces, you suspect the answer is both. As night falls, the camp clusters tighter than usual. Fires are set close to the rock walls, trying to hide their glow. Men huddle shoulder to shoulder, elephants looming like moving cliffs around the perimeter. The darkness feels watchful, as if eyes peer down from the ridges. You eat nothing because there is nothing. Instead, you chew a pebble, like half the army does, pretending it helps. You curl against your pack, listening. At first there is only the wheeze of wind, then a clatter, faint from above, a stone dislodged, or a footstep. Everyone freezes. Spears lift, shields edge closer. You squeeze your eyes shut, wishing sleep would come, but it doesn't. You lie awake in the shadow of cliffs, heart racing, prey caught between the mountain and whoever waits to strike. Joke 3 keeps you company through the long hours. If this is a guided tour of the Alps, the brochure left out the part about dying. Dawn comes cruelly bright. The first rays split the peaks, scattering shards of light across the snow until everything gleams like broken glass. You blink, and the world blinks back with blinding ferocity. At first, you think it's beautiful. Then you realize it's dangerous. The snow reflects the sun like a million tiny mirrors, dazzling, relentless. You squint, rub your eyes, curse under your breath. Soon enough, men stumble as if drunk, their gaze fixed on nothing but shimmering white. Snow blindness. You've heard of it, but now you live it. One soldier ties a strip of cloth across his brow, slitting it so only narrow beams of light slip through. Another smears ash under his eyes like a warrior painting, claiming it cuts the glare. You copy him, rubbing soot from the fire pit onto your face. It helps, barely. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's troops actually suffered from snow blindness during the march, but your watering eyes make you an enthusiastic supporter of the theory. The trail is treacherous. Crevasses open under thin crust, yawning like jaws waiting for the careless. A mule crashes through, thrashing, squealing, hauled out only by 6 men tugging ropes and shouting. You step wide after that, placing each foot like a chess piece, deliberate and cautious. Your breath comes sharp, your chest aches. The higher you go, the more the air thins, until even laughter feels expensive. And yet, men still find jokes. One Iberian points at the gleaming landscape and declares it a god's banquet of salt. Another swears he'll bring home pockets of snow and sell them in Carthage as luxury dessert. You manage a weak chuckle. Joke 1 of the day. Frozen mountain salt, sold by the handful. no refunds if it melts. The elephants stumble too. One lifts its trunk, flailing as though the brightness itself were an enemy. Its handler coaxes it forward, patting its side, murmuring in a sing-song voice that feels absurd in this desolation. Yet the animal obeys, plodding ahead with weary majesty. It seems impossible, an African giant on a European mountaintop, but there it is, trudging just like you. Historians still argue whether a single elephant survived the entire ordeal. Livy names one, Surus, said to be Hannibal's last survivor. Looking at the exhausted herd, you're not sure any of them will live to see another valley. You pause to drink. Your skin of wine water is half ice and you nod like a fruit. The taste is sharp, sour, oddly comforting. Nearby, a soldier crunches snow in his fist and mutters that his tongue has forgotten the idea of warmth. Another swears by a cure, chewing pine needles to make the thirst more interesting. You try one. It tastes like a tree scolding you for your choices. Joke 2 arrives easily. Congratulations. You've invented pine-flavored ice water, coming soon to nobody's favorite tavern. The climb stretches endlessly. You lose track of time. Every step feels like the same step repeated forever. Men mutter prayers or songs or simply count their breaths. The snow squeaks. The wind sighs. The sun glares down like an interrogator who has all day. You try to laugh at the absurdity. Here you are, thousands of feet above sea level, being interrogated by the sky itself. The Alps really are dramatic hosts. When you finally crest a ridge, the view steals what little breath you have left. Mountains roll out in every direction, an ocean of white peaks stabbing the heavens. It's breathtaking and terrifying, a reminder of how small you are, how absurd this journey is. One soldier kneels, pressing his forehead into the snow, overcome. Another spits and mutters that Rome isn't worth this. You can't decide which reaction fits you better. The descent looks worse. A long slope, slick and unforgiving, waits below. Scouts already pick their way down, probing with spears. You hear shouts, curses, then laughter as one slides 10 paces and lands unhurt. Still, the thought of your entire army skating unwillingly into oblivion gnaws at you. Historians still argue whether Hannibal lost more men climbing up or tumbling down. Looking at that slope, you put your coin on the latter. As night gathers, the glare fades, but the dread doesn't. Fires glow in hollows shielded from wind. Men sit rubbing their eyes, faces raw from squinting, lids swollen. One soldier insists he sees halos around the flames. Another says he sees the goddess Tanit walking among the sparks. You rub your own eyes and see only smears of light and shapes that refuse to settle. Joke 3 slips out, half a sigh. If blindness is the Alps' idea of hospitality, you'd rather it just served soup. You curl up, eyes burning, and whisper to yourself, you couldn't survive being Hannibal's prey, but somehow, against snow, glare, and hunger, you've survived another day. The whispers start before dawn. Men crouch low, voices thin as smoke, passing rumors from fire to fire. You catch fragments. Tribes ahead, ambush, shadows in the valley. The words weave through the camp until even the elephants shift uneasily, as though they too understand. You stand, stretch aching legs, and listen. Somewhere beyond the ridges, something stirs, a noise too sharp to be wind, too heavy to be wolves. Hannibal appears, his cloak rimmed with frost, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He says nothing, only raises his arm and points forward. It's enough. The column shuffles into line, spears lifted, shields strapped, eyes narrowed. You march toward the unknown, each step echoing the suspicion that the mountain itself has invited guests. Historians still argue whether the tribes that opposed Hannibal were defending their homeland or seeking Roman favor, but in this moment, the nuance doesn't matter. What matters is the trap you might be walking into. The path winds downward into a gorge, narrow and steep. Cliffs rise on both sides, jagged jaws of stone. You grip your spear tighter, heart drumming. The air is too still, too silent. No birds, no wind, just your footsteps crunching too loudly in the snow. One soldier mutters that silence is the loudest warning of all. You nod, wishing you could disagree. Then, clatter, rocks tumble from above, shattering against the frozen ground. Men shout, shields rise, the column bunches. Figures flash on the cliffs, dark shapes quick as hawks. Arrows hiss, stones whip through the air. The ambush is real. You crouch, breath tearing your throat, watching the world collapse into chaos. Mainstream fact to cling to. Livy describes Hannibal's army facing repeated attacks from Alpine tribes, their positions high above raining death on the struggling soldiers below. Some accounts insist whole detachments were lost in these sudden strikes. Historians still argue whether the tribes were unified in their assault or a collection of opportunistic bands, but to you it feels like the entire mountain has declared war. Shields lock. Men shout in half a dozen languages. An elephant bellows, trumpeting like thunder, and charges forward despite the narrow pass. Snow and ice break loose under its weight, scattering attackers from their ledges. For a moment the valley itself shakes, a living drumbeat. You stagger forward with the others, using movement as shield, as hope. The fight is quick, brutal, and lopsided. Stones hammer down, spears jab upward, and the column lurches like a wounded animal. You don't fight so much as survive, ducking behind shields, stumbling past fallen comrades. A soldier near you takes an arrow to the arm and screams. Another drags him onward. The ambush doesn't aim to annihilate you. It aims to bleed you, to remind you of your place. Quirky tidbit, one Carthaginian beside you swears he saw a tribesman wearing a necklace of mule teeth, a charm for luck. You almost laugh, because what better charm for an ambush than the teeth of beasts stolen from past victims? Joke 1. If you live through this, you'll carve yourself a necklace of icicles. Cheap, abundant, and very fashionable until they melt. The attack fades as suddenly as it began. Figures vanish back into the cliffs, their footsteps dissolving into silence. You stagger forward, ears ringing, eyes darting upward at every shadow. The path is littered with the injured and the exhausted. The elephants move slowly now, heads low, their handlers murmuring as if singing children to sleep. When the column halts, men collapse onto their packs, too weary to curse. Fires are lit sparingly, their smoke curling like reluctant prayers. The wounded groan softly, bandages of cloth and bark tied hastily. One soldier insists the tribes will strike again tomorrow, maybe tonight. Another mutters that fear is worse than arrows. You sit in the hush between them, knowing both might be true. Historians still argue whether Hannibal bribed some tribes with silver to pass safely later, or whether sheer attrition carved the way forward. Tonight, silver feels like the only sane choice. You would empty every coin purse in Carthage for one night of peace. Instead, you settle for chewing a snowball, cold comfort in every sense. Joke 2 surfaces as you stare at the cliffs. Ambushes are like surprise parties, except nobody brings cake and everyone leaves bleeding. Sleep is shallow, interrupted by every groan of wind and crack of rock. You dream of cliffs leaning closer, of shadows darting above, of Romans waiting below with the same patience as wolves. You wake with your heart racing, the realization sharp as the air. Prey survives not by winning, but by escaping. And you've escaped for now. Joke 3 limps along with your thoughts as you huddle in your cloak. If the Alps wanted applause for its hospitality, it should try not dropping rocks on the guests. The gorge spits you out into a stretch where the path is not so much a road as a rumor. Thin, slick, and frozen solid. You pause, staring at what lies ahead. A shimmering blue sheet laid over nothing. An ice bridge. It stretches across a hollow as though stitched there by some careless giant, glinting under the pale sun. You've never seen anything like it, and immediately you wish you hadn't. The officers murmur to each other. Scouts tap spears against the surface, listening to the cracks echo. The sound is not reassuring. Still, forward is the only direction, and Hannibal is already pointing his men onward. Historians still argue whether ice crossings like these were exaggerated by ancient sources, but when your boots touch the slick surface, there is no exaggeration in the way your heart pounds. You shuffle, arms spread slightly like a man trying to dance without rhythm. The surface hisses under your sandals. Every step feels too heavy. A soldier beside you slips, lands hard, and scrambles up again, laughing nervously. He mutters that the mountain wants him to rehearse a comedy. You almost smile. Joke 1. If the Alps offered figure skating, None of you would pass auditions. The elephants face the crossing next. Their handlers coax them onto the ice, but the beasts hesitate, massive feet sliding. One trumpets, high and mournful, ears flapping like sails in a storm. The noise rattles you worse than any arrow. Still, step by step they move, cracking echoes chasing their weight. You pray silently that the bridge holds. Mainstream fact. Livy records that Hannibal's engineers sometimes hacked through ice with vinegar and fire to carve paths, though whether they truly melted rock, that way is debated. Here, however, the enemy isn't rock but glass underfoot, and the army must glide across like unwilling dancers. Historians still argue whether these descriptions are colorful exaggerations or gritty reality, but your legs don't care. They tremble as if every step might be your last. Halfway across, a low groan rises, deep and dreadful. The ice quivers, men freeze, gripping each other. Somewhere a mule brays and thrashes, hooves skidding. Its weight splits the surface with a jagged line that races outward. Soldiers shout, pulling back ropes, trying to steady the beast. With a final squeal, it vanishes into the abyss below, the cracked ceiling shut as if swallowing the evidence. Silence follows, broken only by shallow, terrified breathing. Quirky tidbit, one Iberian soldier insists that spitting on the ice before stepping brings good luck, a superstition he swears by. You watch him hawk and step, and when he doesn't vanish, a few others try it too. You mutter that the Alps now have more spit than stone. Joke 2. Congratulations, you've invented alpine ice seasoning. Finally, your boots touch solid ground again. You almost collapse to your knees, kissing the rough stone, though your pride stops you. Others are not so restrained. Men cry, laugh, even kiss one another in relief. An elephant trumpets low, shaking frost from its back as if declaring victory. But the ordeal isn't over. Snow begins to fall, thick and sudden, erasing footprints as quickly as they're made. The army clusters tighter, torches flickering against the white curtain. You glance back, and the ice bridge is already vanishing into the blur as though it never existed. You shiver, not from the cold this time, but from the knowledge that one misstep could erase you just as easily. Camp that night is restless. Men rub frostbitten fingers, passing around scraps of cloth to wrap toes. Fires hiss and die quickly under the weight of falling snow. A soldier mutters that the gods are bearing you in advance. Another argues the snow is a blanket, meant to hide you from Romans. Historians still argue whether Hannibal lost more men to weather or to enemy attacks in the Alps. You feel strongly that weather is winning. You lie down, cloak pulled over your head, listening to the faint groan of ice somewhere far behind. The memory of that sound lingers, low and hungry, echoing through your bones. You close your eyes, whispering a promise to yourself. Tomorrow, you will survive the next step. Joke 3 eases into your thoughts as you drift. If Carthage ever builds a winter resort, you're personally recommending against the ice bridge package. Hannibal moves through the camp like a hard wind with a destination. No trumpet flourishes, no grand platform, just a man in a frost-cut cloak, boots scuffed white, eyes set on a line only he can see. He doesn't bother to warm his hands at a fire. He warms the fire by walking past it. Men edge closer as if heat might ricochet off his shoulders. You draw up too, because even prey needs a shepherd, and today, the shepherd looks like a storm in human shape. He points forward with a staff, plain wood, iron-bound tip, at nothing you can distinguish, a notch in a ridge, a fold of cloud, a promise. Ahead, his voice says, not loud, but shaped to carry. You feel the syllable like a tap on the spine. He doesn't sell comfort, he sells direction. If inspiration had calories, you'd be fed. Unfortunately, morale is gluten-free. Joke 1, whispered mostly to yourself. Around him the officers cluster, frost-rhyming beards and eyelashes. Someone murmurs the day's numbers, losses tucked into low tones. Hannibal doesn't flinch. The arithmetic of pain has been on his slate since Spain. Mainstream fact to steady your feet, in 218 BCE, he brought this mixed host, Libyans, Numidians, Iberians, Gauls, and those improbable elephants, overland toward Italy after skirting the Roman fleet by crossing the Rhone. You can practically taste river mud and pine resin still clinging to the column's memory. He crouches in the snow and scratches a map with that iron tip, Riverline here, a jag of ridge there, a curl that means valley. The drawing is spare, the gesture deliberate. He does not promise ease, he promises sequence, this, then that. We move when the light hardens, he says. Light hardens. What a way to talk about morning. It makes you glance up to see if the sun has bones. He stands and looks from face to face. Not like a father exactly. Like a craftsman checking the grain in tough wood, deciding where to plane, where to trust. Historians still argue whether his greatest weapon was speed, deception, or the kind of charisma that makes men carry mountains because he points at them. You don't need a seminar. When he lifts his hand, your knees consider obedience even before your brain votes. He walks the elephant line. The beasts lower their heads, steam pluming, ears stiff as shields. He touches one trunk, a brush, not a pat, and the animal stills. Good, he says, to the handler or the world. You like to borrow that word. It seems in short supply up here. He turns through the ranks of half-frozen men. There is a rumor, 3 versions by your count, that as a child he swore before an altar to be Rome's enemy for life. Historians still argue whether that oath is truth, theater, or a tidy bit of Carthaginian propaganda grafted onto a real boy. Right now, the origin story feels less important than the result. This is a man who points at the worst road and makes it walkable because he refuses the alternative. He stops by a fire where a cook is coaxing something from a pot that is mostly steam and hope. Hannibal takes a sip, winces almost invisibly, nods anyway. The gesture travels through the onlookers like a hand squeezing a shoulder. If he can drink it, you can pretend it's soup. A Libyan cavalryman near you mutters, "I would follow that man into a volcano." You reply, he would schedule the volcano and keep it on time. Joke 2. It earns a ghost of a smile. Orders flow, less barked than poured. Lighten loads but keep tools for cutting ice. Bind feet with spare cloth, grease where you can. Quirky tidbit that feels like contraband wisdom. A veteran from the Rhone swears by a smear of olive oil mixed with tallow on cheeks and noses to blunt the wind's bite. Someone else swears by goose fat, someone else by beeswax, and one inventive soul rubs a pinch of cumin under his scarf because it smells like warmth. The camp takes what rituals it can get. He signals the Numidian scouts. They glide out, lean shadows with eyes tuned to mountain grammar. He confers with the Iberian slingers, whose calloused fingers cradle stones like promises. He gestures a new order to the engineers. Carry, not just picks and axes, but bundles of brush. If the ice collapses, build a skin of twigs to spread weight. Historians still argue whether teams really use brush mats on the worst slopes, but the idea spreads through the ranks with the satisfying click of a solution you can hold. Then, the speech, if you can call it that. No purple words, no thunder. He simply lifts his chin toward a seam in the clouds and says, "Beyond." He lets the words sit there, broad enough to hold hunger, wolves, Romans, and the patient cruelty of stone. "Not back," he adds, softer. You feel your shoulders settling into the truth. Back is Rome's hands. Forward is your own blistered feet. You will take your feet. He passes you close enough that you see the wind find cracks at the corners of his mouth, the salt white line where the cold has been chewing. He looks at you, not through you. It is terrifying to be noticed by a purpose this clean. You lower your eyes and discover there are tears crusted in your lashes you don't remember manufacturing. The column begins to form, a living braid of intent. Drums would waste breath, so the cadence travels in nods and lifted chins. You re-roll your cloak, cinch your strap, tuck a pebble in your cheek to tease saliva from a stingy mouth. A friend bumps your elbow and passes a pinch of that oil and tallow mix. It smells faintly like last summer. You smear it on and pretend your face remembers warmth. If luxury had a scent up here, it would be grease that isn't from your own sandals. Joke 3, and it lands gently. As you step out, you find your mind replaying scraps. The map scratched in snow, that single syllable, beyond, and the way his finger cut the air like a plumb line. If leadership is a weather, today it presses at your back, steady as a hand. You are still prey. The Romans are still somewhere behind. Wolves are still running their quiet arithmetic along the ridges, and the mountain remains an accountant of ankles and courage. But there is a target shaped into the fog now. You can move toward a shape. You pass the place where the ice groaned yesterday. The sound lives in your bones like a held note. Men step lighter here, even the elephants lifting their feet as if practicing courtesy. You catch yourself humming a rhythm that matches the staff taps of the engineers ahead. Tap, step, tap, step. The mind loves a metronome. The heart loves a reason. Someone near you voices the doubt no one quite names. Will he stop? Will he ever say enough? The question hangs like frost. You imagine the truth and feel a useful fear. He will not stop. Not on this ridge. Not at the next river. He is a man who turned the word Rome into a direction arrow. Being led by that kind of resolve is a relief and a liability. It means you may live through this pass and be asked to spend what's left of yourself in the next. The wind lifts, the light does its hardening trick, and the line tilts into motion. Your boots bite, your breath plumes, your mind quiets into the work. You don't know which pass this is, which debate it will feed, which footnote you might become. Historians still argue whether greatness is a plan or a stubbornness. From where you trudge, it feels like a fuse lit at both ends, and you are a spark moving along the cord. Forward then, beyond. The snow is already marked with blood before you notice it. At first, it's only a few drops, bright against the white, like berries scattered by some invisible hand. Then more, darker, spread where a man has slipped and gashed his leg on rock. The stain soaks fast, disappearing into the snow, until only a faint pink patch remains, cold and silent as if the mountain itself drinks it up. You realize this place leaves no record of pain. It erases everything, quickly, neatly. The column trudges onward, but skirmishes ripple at the edges. Raiders dart out from high ridges. Loose arrows, sling stones, then vanish. The sound is sudden, then gone, like the pop of a twig in the fire. A man stumbles near you, clutching his shoulder, red blooming through his cloak. He sinks to his knees, groaning, but others haul him upright, dragging him onward. Stopping isn't allowed. Not here. Not when every pause invites the mountain to claim more prey. Mainstream fact. Livy describes how Hannibal's men were harassed constantly. Arrows and stones raining down from the cliffs, forcing them into narrow choke points where blood vanished into snow before the army could even bury the fallen. Historians still argue whether these accounts exaggerate the casualties or understate them, but you don't need statistics. You have the raw echo of a scream cut short. The elephant's trumpet, uneasy. Their bulk draws fire as much as it deflects it. A sling stone cracks against one's skull, leaving it reeling, groaning, ears flapping. The handler presses his forehead to its trunk, whispering words no one else hears. Somehow the beast steadies, plods forward again. You can't decide if that's courage or madness. Maybe both. Quirky tidbit. A soldier near you swears that spitting on snow before battle keeps arrows from finding you. He spits 3 times, then lifts his shield. Another says wearing a scrap of red cloth distracts mountain spirits and makes you invisible to men. He ties a shred to his wrist. You consider both strategies, then tighten your cloak and mutter that you'd settle for lunch instead. Joke 1. If fashion saved lives, you'd all be strutting down Rome's streets by now. Suddenly the cliffs echo with shouts. A rush of figures appears above, silhouetted against the gray sky. Stones tumble, arrows hit. The column erupts, shields up, spears bristling, voices shouting in half a dozen languages. You crouch low, hearing the hollow thud of missiles against shields, the sickening crack of a skull struck. One man crumples, rolled aside, already forgotten by the surge forward. The only rule here is motion. Hannibal's officers bark orders. Slingers whirl stones upward in reply, their projectiles snapping through the air like hornets. For a moment the raiders falter, shadows pulling back into the cliffs. Men cheer weakly, though the sound is thin, quickly swallowed by the wind. Historians still argue whether Hannibal truly won these small encounters, or simply endured them long enough to keep moving. Endurance feels like the real victory. You walk, you bleed, you live another step. The march resumes, but the snow carries fresh marks now. red streaks, black stains where fire arrows smoldered, broken spears jutting like dead branches. You step over a shield abandoned in the drift. Its bronze rim gleams faintly, already frosting over. You wonder how long it will take before the mountain hides all traces, swallowing the story whole. As night falls, camp feels different. Quieter, heavier. Men sit close, patching wounds with rags, chewing bitter herbs said to draw the heat out. You taste one leaf, sharp and sour, and nearly gag. The soldier handing it to you insists it works better than a Roman doctor. Joke, too. You're not sure if it heals frostbite, but it might cure your appetite permanently. The fires burn small, hunched against rocks to hide their glow. The elephants stand in a ring around camp, shadows shifting like watchtowers. A handler sings to one in a voice so soft it barely carries, words lilting like a lullaby. The contrast is almost absurd, gentle music in a place where every breath feels borrowed. You close your eyes, listening, letting the sound smooth some of the rough edges of fear. But the memory of red snow won't fade. You see it every time you blink, each patch a reminder that the mountain isn't neutral ground. It's a predator too, swallowing men, mules, even elephants without hesitation. You wonder how many more stains it will hide before you ever glimpse Italy's valleys. Joke 3 drifts up as you pull your cloak tighter. If Rome ever asks what slowed Hannibal's army, the answer is simple. The Alps build you for every drop of blood. You lie back, staring at the stars that pierce the clouds. The fire sputters. The camp groans with the weight of exhaustion. And still, somewhere beyond the ridges, Romans wait, patient hunters letting the mountain do their work. The morning feels thinner. The column assembles, but there are gaps now where men should be. You don't need a roll call. The silence counts for you. Some vanished in the night. Frostbite took them quietly, or avalanches rolled them away, or perhaps they slipped off into the darkness, hoping to find their own way home. Hannibal doesn't pause for grief. His eyes sweep the line, flinty, then fix forward. You pull your cloak tighter and fall in, because if you stop, you'll join the missing. As you trudge, you notice the way the mountain eats men without ceremony. One soldier leans on his spear too long, slips and tumbles down a slope. The line halts only briefly. Shouts echo, ropes are thrown, but he's gone. The snow smooths itself like nothing happened. Historians still argue whether more lives were lost to battle or to the Alps themselves, but you're fairly sure the mountain keeps the bigger tally. The hunger is worse today. Bellies groan in chorus, low as the elephant's rumbles. A soldier near you jokes that you should eat snow to fill the space. Another mutters that the snow has already eaten enough of you. Quirky tidbit. One veteran insists chewing strips of boiled pine bark can keep a man alive for days. He passes you a piece and you nod reluctantly. It tastes like despair dipped in resin. Joke 1. Congratulations. You're now a connoisseur of forest cuisine. Around midday, the clouds lower again, muffling sound. You march in a haze, unable to tell if you're going up or down. The world shrinks to the crunch of your boots and the sight of the man's back in front of you. Suddenly the line breaks. Men shout. A hollow gap yawns where the path should be. An avalanche in the night has stolen it. You peer down into the void, dizzy, imagining yourself falling endlessly through white silence. Hannibal rides forward, studies the gap, and orders the engineers. Picks strike ice. Torches hiss, melting steps. Men drag brush to lay across cracks, weaving makeshift mats. You watch them lash branches into crude ladders, lowering them like bridges over the abyss. Mainstream fact. Ancient sources tell of Hannibal's men cutting roads into the ice with fire and vinegar, though historians still argue if this was literal chemistry or literary flourish. Either way, the work ahead of you is grim. Crossing is terrifying. You clutch the ropes, toes finding uncertain purchase on slick branches. The abyss yawns, hungry. Below, the wind howls as though it wants to suck you down. One mule panics halfway, thrashes and plunges, dragging its load with it. The sound echoes like thunder. You squeeze your eyes shut, shuffle faster, and somehow make it across. On solid ground again, you realize your legs are shaking. You laugh weakly, muttering to yourself, "Joke 2. If this is Carthage's idea of a scenic route, the tourism board is getting a very bad review." That night, the camp is quiet. Fires are small, voices muted. The elephants stand hunched, covered in frost like statues carved from snow. A handler strokes one's trunk, humming, though his eyes look hollow. You chew a scrap of dried grain, tasteless and gritty. A soldier swears the Romans aren't even following anymore, that they're waiting at the end of the pass with warm tents and fresh bread. The idea makes you laugh, though not kindly. Bread feels like a myth. Quirky moment. Another soldier tries to lighten the mood by juggling stones. He fumbles, drops them, curses in 3 languages, then tries again until even the officers smirk. For 5 minutes, you forget your prey. For 5 minutes, the Alps are only a backdrop for clumsy comedy. Then the wind rises, the fires gutter, and reality presses back in. As you lie down, cloak pulled over your face, you feel the emptiness where companions should be. Their absence is louder than wolves, louder than Romans. The Alps don't roar, they whisper, and they're whispering that more of you will vanish before Italy appears. Joke 3 drifts through your tired mind. If the mountain keeps souvenirs, it must have the largest lost and found in history. You close your eyes, knowing you've survived another day, but the thought that you might not wake with the same company gnaws more deeply than hunger. The elephants begin to look like mountains losing their shape. Their hides, once the color of river mud and sun, now wear a frost of old glass. They lift their feet reluctantly, as if each step must negotiate with the ice. One plants a massive pad, slides half a handspan, and rights itself with a shudder that ripples through the line like a cough everyone tries to ignore. When the first trumpet breaks the morning, long, cracked, and lonely, the cliffs hand the sound back and forth until it comes home sounding like a funeral horn. Handlers move closer, breath ghosting on tusks. They pat trunks and murmur syllables that have crossed deserts and harbors to arrive here, ridiculous and necessary. A Numidian mahout wraps a strip of wool around an elephant's tail to keep blood in the tip. Another rubs oil into the animal's ankles where the skin has cracked. Quirky tidbit for your pocket. One old-timer swears by warming flat stones in the coals, sliding them under a blanket near the belly to thaw the core, the hearth trick, he calls it, with the gravity of a kitchen secret. You watch steam lift from the blanket and imagine the animal's vast organs remembering summer. A young elephant balks at a ledge. The drop is not dramatic, only persuasive. It puts its weight backward like a stubborn door. The handler clicks his tongue, sings a note that vibrates more in the chest than in the ear, and the giant inches forward. You feel the tone in your ribs as if someone tapped the inside of your sternum. Joke 1 arrives to save you from holding your breath forever. Somewhere in Carthage, you suspect there's a union for elephant complaints, and today's agenda is all of it. Mainstream fact to steady the scene. Ancient sources agree Hannibal did march war elephants toward Italy in 218 BCE. Polybius puts the herd in the dozens, and that many suffered terribly in the crossing. A few survived and later thundered into the Battle of the Trebia, startling Roman cavalry unused to fighting beside such shapes. Historians still argue whether those elephants were African, likely the now vanished forest type, or imported Indian stock. They also argue about Surus, the famous Syrian, whether that label marked his breed, his origin, or simply the marketing of a legend. One of the big bulls, bigger even than the rest, stumbles. The world pauses, its forelegs skid, rear legs splay, and the great head dips so suddenly that men nearby flinch as if the sky tripped. The handler runs along the shoulder, weightless beside the tonnage, pressing palm to skin, voice a constant rope. The bull heaves upright, lungs booming, and the trumpet that follows is shorter, embarrassed almost, like someone insisting they meant to do that. The column breathes again. You had not realized how much of your courage was stored in animals you do not ride. Shoes, a soldier mutters hopefully, pointing to the feet. You remember the camp rumor, bronze-studded sandals for elephants, and glance to see if anyone has buckled miracles to these pads. No sandals, only cracked skin dark with oil and hoarfrost. Historians still argue whether any kind of hobbling or soul guard was attempted on long marches, but what you see is simpler. Hands, cloth, patience, and a stubborn, shared forward. The slope tilts into treachery. Snow drifts across glare ice, lying about depth. The engineers spread brush where they can, making a mat that whispers under your sandals. The elephants test it and the sticks crunch like 1,000 dry noodles. An Iberian jokes that you are serving the mountain a salad course. Joke 2, offered to your own ears. If the Alps own a restaurant, today's special is twigs a la panic. The second falter becomes a fall, but not a disaster. Not yet. A smaller elephant sinks to its knee in a drift that hides an ice shelf. The leg wedges in a crack with a noise you never want to hear again, halfway between a snap and a sigh. Men spill forward, ropes ready. The handler climbs the shoulder, jams a lever of spruce into the seam, and everyone leans. Your palms burn on the rope. Your back remembers work you thought you'd left in another life. The leg comes free. The elephant quivers from spine to toenail, then stands, shame large as its shadow. The handler presses his brow to the beast, stays there, two foreheads making a small, hot world. You look away because reverence is a kind of privacy. A debate ripples through the officers. Do you push the herd to the middle of the column to shelter them from ledges, or leave them at the center where their pace sets a safer rhythm? Historians still argue whether Hannibal's decision to keep elephants prominent on the march was practical, plowing snow and steadying men, or psychological, a moving banner that said, "Carthage is impossible, and here we are anyway." Watching morale rise and fall with each trumpet, you suspect the banner mattered. Food for the animals becomes a calculus of twigs and pine tips. Men snap branches, strip bark, toss armfuls beneath massive mouths. The chewing is so loud you want to cry with relief at the proof of appetite. One handler claims he sweetened water with a smear of wine to encourage drinking in the cold. Another insists that salt on the tongue wakes thirst sooner. The elephants lift their trunks for both like aristocrats humoring earnest kitchen staff. You resist the urge to curtsy. The Romans' pressure feels different today. Quieter, more patient, as if they too are waiting to see whether gravity will do the work. You imagine a Roman centurion turning to his men and saying, "Let the elephants choose our victory." Joke 3, gentle and mean all at once. If the chase is a race, the mountain is the bookie, and you do not like the odds it offers. By midday, the trumpets have spaced out, fewer, lower, less panicked. The herd settles into a rhythm you can borrow. Step, pause, place. The men mirror it without talking. You realize that for all your bravado about Roman steel and tribal ambush, you have been measuring success in the shape of footprints big enough to sleep in. Being prey takes many forms. Today, being prey means hoping your giants don't break. An officer rides back along the line with the news. A shelf ahead, broad enough to camp early. No one argues. When you reach it, the wind drops and the air behaves as if it remembers the concept of mercy. Fires catch on the first try. The elephants stand in a ragged crescent, rear ends to the draft like a living wall. Men lay their cloaks in that shelter and sigh in the plural. A handler loosens a strap from a tusk and slides off a charm, small bronze stamped with a palm tree. He kisses it, taps it against the tusk, and tucks it into his own beard, for luck. Quirky again, but who are you to deny luck its hobbies? Mainstream remembrance returns as you stare at those vast silhouettes. Later, down where the rivers unfreeze, Romans will learn to dislike these shapes at Trebia. Later still, winter will take most of them anyway. Historians still argue whether Surus truly marched on with a single broken tusk and a platform strapped to his back so Hannibal could see over the fog, a story made to be carved on coin or told to children. Whether or not that tidy picture is true, you feel the kernel of it in your bones, vision riding on endurance. Night thickens, and the breath of the elephants makes columns in the dark. A handler humps the chest note again, another answers a minor third below, and for a moment the camp sounds like a great instrument tuning to the altitude. You close your eyes and let the bass of survival smooth your pulse. The mountain will still be there in the morning. So, it seems, will the elephants, battered, bewildered, and somehow still walking, like an argument with physics that refuses to end. You curl under your cloak in their lee and say the softest truth aloud. Without them, you would feel smaller than your own fear. With them, you feel like fear can be carried. The funeral horn sound does not come again tonight. When it does, another day, you hope it is only the echo remembering you past. Morning does not arrive gently. It crashes into camp with the shrieks of men and the barking cough of cold. A soldier has pulled his boots off in the night and discovered his toes stiff, waxy, more ice than flesh. Others crowd around, muttering advice. Rub them with snow, soak them in wine, cut them off before rot sets in. Quirky tidbit. One old Iberian insists that the secret is to smear the toes with garlic paste, which he swears keeps the blood awake. He looks utterly serious. You decline to volunteer. Around the fires, soldiers swap remedies with the zeal of doctors. Some chew bitter mountain herbs, believing the sting wards off frostbite. Another slathers pine resin on cracked lips, wincing but nodding proudly. A Libyan cavalryman reveals a pouch of dried goat fat he's hoarded since Spain. He melts a smear of it on his fingers, laughing as if he's discovered luxury skincare in hell. Joke 1. Congratulations, you've accidentally opened the world's coldest day spa. Mainstream fact. Ancient armies used wine, vinegar, and herbal poultices for wounds, but frostbite was less understood. Sources describe men losing fingers, ears, and toes in the Alps, with makeshift treatments improvised daily. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's men carried knowledge of herbal salves from Numidian healers or invented them here, but the urgency of frozen limbs left little time for scholarship. As you march again, you notice men limping, hands tucked under armpits, noses bandaged with scraps of cloth. The air bites harder at every step, gnawing at skin through wool. You can feel your own toes aching, as if they're plotting mutiny. You wiggle them constantly, whispering bargains. Move today, and I'll give you a warm bath tomorrow. They don't believe you. The path narrows to a ledge, and you pass a makeshift clinic, if such a thing can exist in snow. A handful of soldiers sit slumped, their feet bare, black blisters creeping. A healer pours warmed wine over the wounds, steam rising. The men hiss, curse, then go silent. Some will walk again, others not. One man stares at the mountain, expression hollow, as though his spirit slipped away before his body. You walk faster, because to stop is to join him. By midday, the cold intensifies. Clouds choke the sun, and a storm lashes across the pass. Snow whips sideways, a wall of white that blinds and batters. The army clumps together, shields raised against the wind. Elephants lumber on, their massive bodies absorbing gusts, ears cracking like sails. You hunch low, squinting through slits of cloth, each step a battle. Historians still argue whether Hannibal lost half his force to storms alone. Today, you believe it. Quirky moment in the chaos. One soldier ties a scrap of bronze mirror to his chest, claiming it reflects the cold away. Another wears a dead crow's wing under his tunic, muttering that mountain spirits hate feathers. You would laugh if your face weren't frozen. Joke 2. If superstition made heat, you'd be sweating in a desert. The storm finally relents as dust stains the peaks. The army collapses into camp, men dropping onto packs, fire sputtering alive with desperate urgency. Healers move among the fallen, unwrapping frozen fingers, rubbing limbs, forcing broth between cracked lips. You take a sip of your own ration, thin, bitter, with a trace of herbs, and feel warmth ripple faintly through your chest. It's not enough, but it's something. That night, a soldier tells a tale about ancient Scythians using horse-dung poultices to draw frost from the skin. The others laugh, groan, and then ask if he's serious. He is. You lie back on your pack, staring at the stars glittering like broken glass, and wonder how many strange cures history will forget. Joke 3 drifts across your thoughts as sleep tugs. In 1,000 years, someone will invent socks and call it progress. You close your eyes, promising your body that tomorrow you'll find warmth. It's a lie, of course, but in this cold, even lies are worth clinging to. Fog pours into the valley like milk spilled from an unseen bowl. It coils around the column, blunting sound, bending shapes. You can't see more than a few paces ahead, and even the elephants become vague gray islands, their outlines dissolving into the mist. The ground muffles underfoot, snow crunch softened until it feels as though you're walking inside a dream. A bad dream. The men whisper nervously. Someone mutters that the fog is cursed, that spirits walk in it, mimicking comrades' voices to lure you away. You roll your eyes, but still keep closer to the man in front of you, counting his steps like a lifeline. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's army encountered thick fogs like this, or whether later writers added drama. Drama or not, your skin prickles with the certainty that you are not alone. Shapes loom and vanish. A boulder rises like a crouching figure, then melts into nothing. A tree stump turns into a man raising a spear, then collapses back into wood. Your mind plays tricks. Hunger, cold, exhaustion, all stir illusions. Quirky tidbit. A soldier swears he sees an entire column of ghostly Romans marching parallel, their helmets shining faintly. He insists it's an omen. Another counters that it's just his breath fogging in the wind. Either way, you clutch your cloak tighter. The silence is the worst part. The fog swallows voices, so even when men speak, the sound seems far away, untethered. Once you call out, and your own voice comes back faint and strange, as if someone else is answering. You quicken your pace, not because you believe the ghost stories, but because part of you does. Joke one slips through your lips, shaky. Congratulations, you've been upgraded from soldier to background actor in the world's spookiest theater production. Then movement, real movement. A shadow darts across the trail ahead. Men freeze, gripping spears. For a breathless moment you expect an ambush, arrows out of the haze, but nothing follows, just silence. Heavier now, pressing in. The fog curls tighter, as if listening. Hannibal himself rides forward, his cloak pale with frost, his eyes scanning the mist. He doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't need to. Forward, he says, and the line obeys. You step, then step again, trusting the sound of boots in front of you more than your own sight. Suddenly the ground drops. A man cries out, vanishing into white. Shouts follow, ropes thrown blindly, but when they haul back there's nothing. The mountain has claimed him quietly, efficiently. You press your lips tight, forcing yourself not to look too long at the gap. Historians still argue how many soldiers disappeared in avalanches or falls during this march. You decide the fog itself could be listed as a predator. The trail winds through the valley floor now, hemmed by cliffs you can barely see. You imagine shapes moving just beyond sight, raiders pacing you in silence. Every crack of stone, every snap of twig magnifies until it sounds like an army. The elephants grow restless, trunks swaying nervously, their low rumbles vibrating through the ground. You press a hand against the cold flank of one, reassured by its bulk even as it trembles. Camp that night is a hush within a hush. Fires burn low, their light smothered by fog. Men huddle shoulder to shoulder, too afraid to drift apart lest the mist swallow them. A soldier begins to hum softly, a tune that wavers but holds. Others join in, until the camp vibrates with a low, steady sound. Not music exactly, more like proof of existence. Quirky moment. One man scratches runes into the snow, claiming they ward off ghosts. Another spits 3 times into the fire, muttering a curse against shadows. You lie down, cloak pulled over your head, and the world shrinks to warmth and heartbeat. Outside, the fog drifts, patient and endless. You imagine it parting just enough for wolves, or worse, Romans, to slip through. You whisper to yourself that you are not alone, though it doesn't sound reassuring. Joke 2. If fog is free camouflage, someone forgot to tell the prey it works both ways. Sleep is shallow. Dreams twist, shapes moving, voices calling, hands reaching. You wake often, heart racing, only to find the fog still there, still patient. You realize it may never leave, only trade one set of prey for another. Joke 3 sneaks in as you drift back down. When this is all over, You're opening a tavern called the Ghost Valley, where the only thing on the menu will be soup you can't see. The howls begin before sunrise, long, mournful notes echoing from ridge to ridge until you can't tell how many throats sing the hunger song. One voice becomes three, three becomes six, six become a chorus. You lie still under your cloak, heart hammering, telling yourself it's only a dream. Then another howl cuts sharper, closer, and the camp stirs like a flock of startled birds. Men sit up, grab spears, mutter prayers. The elephants rumble uneasily, their trunks swaying like pendulums. You rise, stamping your feet to warm them, but the noise grows louder, nearer. Wolves. They've been following you for days, feasting on the trail of corpses and discarded pack animals. Now they're bold enough to press close. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's march truly suffered wolf attacks, but the Alps hold no shortage of predators, and this morning the chorus feels very real. The scouts return with grim faces. The pack is shadowing both flanks. You march anyway, because you must, but every step feels stalked. Men glance sideways constantly, scanning the snowfields for movement. You catch glimpses, gray shapes darting just beyond reach, eyes glinting amber in the gloom. Quirky tidbit. One soldier insists wolves won't cross a line of ash scattered on the ground. He tears a handful from the fire pit and sprinkles it like breadcrumbs. Another swears wolves despise music, so he begins to hum off key. You silently beg him to stop before the wolves decide to kill him first. The path grows steeper, trees clinging thinly to the slope. The snow is deep, crunching underfoot, and you hear it, the soft pad of paws matching your rhythm. Every time you stop, the sound stops. Every time you move, it begins again. The realization settles like ice in your gut. You are being hunted with patience. Then it happens. A mule at the rear falters, slipping on the path. Before the handlers can lift it, gray shadows surge in, snarling, teeth flashing. Men shout, spears jab, but the pack scatters and reforms, circling, snapping. Blood sprays bright against snow, then vanishes as quickly as it appeared. The mule thrashes once, then lies still. The wolves melt back into the fog, dragging scraps, eyes still gleaming at the edge of sight. Mainstream fact. Roman and Carthaginian accounts describe armies losing animals to alpine predators, though rarely in detail. Historians still argue whether wolves took down men as well, or simply scavenged the aftermath. Watching the line tighten, shields raised against fur and fangs, you believe both are possible. You clutch your spear tighter, breath fast. Men mutter charms, garlic tied to belts, small bronze figurines pressed to lips, prayers to Baal or Tanit. A soldier near you whispers that wolves respect bravery, so you must meet their gaze without flinching. You try. The eyes you lock onto glint like coins, unblinking. You look away first. Joke 1. Thin and bitter, congratulations. You're starring in the Alps' longest running dinner theater. Tonight's special guest, you. The elephants help. When the wolves draw too near, a handler urges his beast forward. The elephant trumpets, snow flying from its trunk, and the wolves scatter, whining at the thunder. For a moment, you feel the absurd comfort of hiding behind a creature that weighs 6 tons. But even the elephants can't march forever. Their steps are slower now, their breaths labored clouds. The day drags on under the wolves' invisible leash. Every pause feels dangerous, every snack break haunted. Men chew bark, snow, or nothing at all, their eyes flicking constantly to the edges. When camp is set at last, guards triple their watch, fires burn larger than usual. The wolves keep their distance, but their howls echo all night, circling, waiting. Sleep comes in scraps, each dream broken by a snarl in the distance. Quirky moment. A Numidian rider ties strips of rawhide to his spear tip, claiming the smell wards off beasts. Another insists the wolves hate the sound of rattling bone, so he strings a necklace from mule ribs and shakes it at the dark. You smile despite yourself. Joke 2. If Fashion Week ever comes to the Alps, this man will be the runway model for a wolf-proof chic. Morning brings silence, no howls, no shadows. The men don't trust it. They march with shoulders hunched, waiting for the strike. but none comes. Perhaps the wolves are patient, perhaps they've moved on to easier prey. You almost miss their chorus, a strange comfort in its predictability. Almost. That night, as you curl under your cloak, exhaustion pulling at your bones, you whisper one more joke to yourself. Joke 3, if you survive this crossing, you'll never complain about the neighbor's dog again. And then you sleep, uneasy, with the memory of glowing eyes still hovering at the edge of dreams. The storm finds you where warmth is most fragile, at the lip of a half-dug fire pit, hunched over sticks that refuse to believe in flame. Snow comes slantwise, a white handwriting that never stops, and every gust smothers what little spark you coax to life. You cup your palms, breathe carefully, and realize you're treating the ember like a shivering animal you're trying to calm. The smoke answers by stinging your eyes until tears freeze on your lashes. Tonight, you clutch at smoke more than heat, and the smoke is winning. Men crouch in a broken ring, shields planted as wind breaks, cloaks pinned down with stones. The elephant line stands as a living wall beyond, rumps to the gale, steam brimming off their backs like breath made visible. A handler wedges himself between two legs the size of columns and lights a twist of resinous pine. The tiny flame looks heroic and doomed in equal measure. Quirky tidbit. One veteran produces a scab of tinder fungus, brown, dry, and precious, and boasts that it will carry a coal all day inside a leather pouch. He learned it from a goat herd in the mountains of Iberia, he says, which you find both unlikely and right now entirely plausible. The fungus takes, glows like a patient star, and suddenly your own little nest believes in fire again. Mainstream fact to steady your shaking hands. Polybius says Hannibal reached a high point and gave the army 2 days rest, pointing toward the Po Valley as proof that Italy and warmth existed beyond the white. Historians still argue whether that pause happened where later maps put the summit, and whether it was late autumn or the first bite of winter. Some swear by October, others by November. Either way, the lesson is simple and cruel. You can see comfort from here. You just can't reach it tonight. Your fire catches sullenly, making a sound like wet paper learning to be useful. You feed it twigs, then slivers of split pine, then a thicker stick. It complains, smokes, then concedes. The small heat on your knuckles feels like a reunion with someone you weren't sure remembered you. Joke 1 drifts out of you as a sigh. Congratulations. You've invented artisanal, free-range warmth, small batch, and wildly overpriced by weather. The camp is a choreography of tiny survivals. 2 Iberians pry apart a fallen branch to get at the dry marrow wood inside. An engineer shaves curls from a pine with methodical tenderness. A Libyan cavalryman warms black river stones in the coals and slides them into wool socks like pocket suns. You copy him with pebbles the size of plums and decide that if civilization is nothing else, it is the art of not burning your feet while attempting to thaw them. Somewhere behind you, a cook rattles a pot whose contents are mostly snow and optimism. It whispers and steams as though remembering soup by memory alone. Someone tries to sing. The first verses go up and then blow sideways into confetti. The second tries lower, half hum, half growl, and the wind seems not to notice it. Men join, a thin braid of sound that knots your nerves together. The elephants answer with a chest-deep purr that you feel in the soles of your feet. For a minute, the storm is only weather, not judgment. The fuel question is relentless. Branches are scarce above the scrag of timberline. A Numidian points at the drifted edge of camp and shrugs toward a tidy heap of something large, round, and, well, elephantine. He grins apologetically. Dry dung makes decent fuel in deserts. Here, the Alps have been busy freezing everything into sculpture. Still, a few pieces near the lee of a rock have crusted instead of iced. They smolder grudgingly and add a faint sweet earth note to the general bouquet of pine and desperation. You try not to imagine the review you'll give this restaurant later. Joke 2 arrives half warm. Tonight's tasting notes, smoky, barn forward, with a finish of please don't tell anyone. Hannibal walks the line of fire pits as the light drains. He squats by one that smokes more than it burns, lifts a stick, splits it lengthwise, and reveals dry heartwood to the flame. The fire perks up like a mule bribed with an apple. He moves on without sermon or smile. He doesn't need to say, "Do likewise." The lesson chases down the row faster than any order. Historians still argue whether his leadership in the Alps was more engineer, orator, or gambler. Watching him make a flame behave by rearranging wood, you vote engineer tonight. The wind finds a new gear after dusk. Sparks skitter away like fireflies that regret their life choices. You rebuild the hearth lower, scraping a bowl into the snow and lining it with flat stones so the melt doesn't drown your work. A Carthaginian beside you produces a twist of linen char, a black ribbon that takes a spark like it's thirsty, and you trade him 2 sips of your watered wine for the privilege of lighting your fire the easy way once. The char glows, the pine catches, and for 10 minutes you are rich. When the storm lunges hard, whole circles of flame go out at once, and a shiver passes through the camp that has nothing to do with temperature. You hunch, shoulders to ears, and cup your hands again. You blow a long, slow breath as if teaching the flame to breathe with you. It answers, a small red animal refusing to die. You feel unreasonably proud, like you've domesticated a spark. A young soldier extends his palms too quickly, yelps, and jerks back, laughing at himself. Another drapes damp socks on a twig rack and watches steam ribbon up as if it's a sermon. A third man, ever the entrepreneur, holds his hands over your fire for a count of 5, then sells you back your own heat by warming your water skin between his palms and handing it to you with a flourish. Joke 3 bows without apology. You've now paid interest on warmth you just earned, proving the mountain run's a very successful bank. Between gusts, you hear the old rumors walking. Vinegar on rock, firewood mats on ice, hidden caches left by Gallic allies, Romans measuring your pace from far ridges. Historians still argue whether Hannibal greased the path with ingenuity more than with blood, or whether the famous vinegar trick is a literary garnish poured over a plain stew of picks and patience. You stir your own pot with a stick and decide patience is the only spice you can afford. The fire settles into its small, convincing talk. You rotate your hands, turn your feet, lean your cheek to the edge of heat, and pretend it's a friendly hand. The smoke threads your hair, your cloak, your memory. Days from now, if you live, you will smell this and know exactly which night it was. Men drowse upright, their faces orange, their breaths long. One snips a lock of hair, tosses it in the coals, and mutters that burning a piece of yourself buys luck for the rest. Another shaves curls of wood and pockets them dry for dawn, the smart future you almost forgot to plan. When, at last, you bank the fire. Stones pulled close, a quilt of ash rolled over coals. You tuck a coal in the veteran's fungus pouch and slip it into your cloak. The glow warms a coin-sized patch against your ribs. It feels like holding tomorrow. You lie back, the storm still shouldering past the elephant wall, the snow still writing its endless letter to nobody in particular, and you let the heat you've earned leak slowly into your bones. Italy is out there, past this night that keeps multiplying itself. So are Romans, and wolves, and slopes that haven't yet decided your name. But here, for the span of a few careful breaths, you own a circle of weather the size of a helmet, and inside it you remember how to be human on purpose. The flame whispers down to red, then to thought, then to sleep. They appear the way weather does, without apology and in multiples. A flicker on the ridgeline, a fur cap against the sky, a glint that could be bronze or ice. You blink and the figures are gone, and then the snow shakes loose a whisper, feet moving where goats prefer. The column hunches instinctively, shields angling upward, slingers palming stones as if counting heartbeats. You keep walking because stopping feels like announcing you're ready to be measured for an arrow. The first shot is not a shot but a stone, flat and quick, the kind that claps a shield like a rude knock. Then the real music starts. Pebbles, darts, a handful of arrows stitched into the wind. Men crouch, the line narrows. Voices trade the urgent syllables of languages that have learned to cooperate under pressure. Above, shadows slide from rock to rock, with the insolent grace of locals in their own hallway. Mainstream fact to hold with chilled fingers. Ancient accounts, Polybius Terse, Livy Dramatic, agree that local alpine tribes harried the march from perches above, and that at least once a chieftain offered safe passage only to set an ambush in a defile. Guides, they called themselves, gravity's assistants, you call them. Historians still argue whether those attackers were the Centrones, the Allobroges, or a cocktail of smaller bands, and whether the notorious friendly escort deception happened on the ascent or the first descent. Your nerves, democratic by nature, vote for yes. The reply is muscle memory. Iberian slingers snap stones back up like wasps. Spearmen lift points as if spearing the weather. Shields angle into a scaled roof where the snow briefly collects and then slides. An elephant shifts forward 2 lengths in trumpets, not bright but basalt deep, and the raider's silhouettes ripple away. You could swear the mountain flinches, but maybe that's you. They don't vanish so much as choose another angle. A scuff in the snow at your left, a cough echoed on your right. The column tightens like a braid. You inhale the familiar cocktail, pine smoke, cold iron, animal musk, and remember that comfort is sometimes just a list of known smells. Joke one arrives to keep your shoulders from climbing to your ears. Welcome to Alpine customer service. Please hold, and a javelin will be with you shortly. An officer motions you inward toward a fold in the path, and the line slides into a tucked posture you now think of as storm shape. Scouts ghost down slope and return with faces like shut doors. 20, 40, someone whispers. Enough, comes the answer that isn't one. Above you, a figure steps onto a tooth of rock and holds up a sprig of fur like a flag. Not an attack posture, a parley. Hannibal rides forward at an unhurried pace that feels like a lecture on dignity. Cloak crisp with frost, eyes storing topography, he stops just within conversational range. The man on the rock is young, cheekbones chiseled by altitude, necklaces of small bones draped across a high tunic. He calls down, and a translator calls back, the words seesawing between peaks. Gifts, he says. Passage. If. If what? You wonder. If silver sings. If elephants don't trample sacred snow. If the Romans pay better and you don't. The ritual unfolds with a logic older than these cliffs. Bracelets of twisted silver are held up. A pouch of salt, white gold in cold places, changes hands. A skein of violently dyed wool unrolls like a small sunrise. Quirky tidbit tossed into your mental pouch. A Carthaginian peddler turned cook swears blue cloth is the real key. That some high valleys prize it as weather magic. A patch of summer sky you can wear when the real one won't cooperate. You watch a sliver of indigo vanish into a chieftain's fist and decide you believe in textiles as temporary policy. It isn't all theater. Hostages are proposed, 2 from each side to prove goodwill has bones. Hannibal nods once. The exchange happens with grim efficiency. Young men with steady jaws step into the custody of strangers. You feel a tug in your chest that is older than armies. Someone's son measuring a horizon he didn't choose. Historians still argue whether bribes and hostages bought any true safety or merely reset the ambush clock. You file the debate under useful, even if untrue, like that snowball you keep in your cheek to trick thirst into patience. The column moves again under watchful ridges, a piece thin as mountain air. For a few hundred paces, your shoulders drop a notch and your breath evens out. You inventory the trivia of survival. A sliver of tallow left in your pouch, the good thong on your sandal, the coal you tucked last night, and the veteran's fungus puck still warm against your ribs. If diplomacy had calories, you'd be full. Peace fails where passes pinch. As the path threads into a rock throat, a scatter of stones clatters down, testing shots, then meaner ones. The escort dissolves as escorts sometimes do. You duck reflexively. A shard nicknames your helmet with a new dent. Men lift shields and do the tortoise without being told. A javelin arcs back upslope and vanishes into fog. A beat later, a cry proves you didn't throw into myth. The elephant nearest you sways, steps, plants itself broadside, accidental bulwark or deliberate. Its handler pats the hide and murmurs a single word in a language you don't know, meaning obvious. Hold. You scuttle along the cliff like an anxious beetle, spear held at that awkward angle that's both weapon and walking stick. The roar of the world narrows to breath and impact, and the treacherous suggestion of movement at your periphery. A man to your rear yelps, then laughs. An arrow has caught only cloak and pinned him gently to a drift. He wriggles free with a bow and presents the torn cloth like a battlefield promotion. Deputy Snow. Your turn for joke 2. Muttered into your scarf. Considering your recent resume, fog extra, wolf appetizer, avalanche understudy, you might as well add moving target to the skill section. The road kings hard around a knob of rock and spits you onto a ledge no wider than 2 honest lies. Above, nothing but white glare. Below, a void knitting itself with cloud. The engineers flick branches onto the slickest spots, a rush mat for fate to step on. You pass, then the elephants and the raiders do what raiders do. They test the nerve of anything tall. A sling stone dings off the big bull's skull with a sound like a bell rung in a cold church. The animal's answer is a short, offended trumpet that rearranges the snow on nearby ledges. You murmur thanks to any god with ears. By late light, the harassment thins, more weather than war. Either the price paid in bracelets pleased them, or the math of risk stopped balancing, or the snow decided to be the only hunter today. You reach a pocket of level ground where camp makes sense. Rock backs you from the wind, a trickle of water stutters down an icicled seam. Fires are coaxed with the care of midwives. The air smells like smoke and wet wool, and that faint animal sweetness you pretend not to recognize. Someone produces a wineskin that tastes more like vinegar each night and passes it around with elaborate ceremony, as if sourness can be improved by etiquette. You tilt your head and let the burn remind you you're made of something ignitable. A Gaul with a smile like a broken gate pantomimes the day's diplomacy. Little jingling fingers for silver, big eyes for elephants, stabbing motions for the parts where trust took a nap. The officers do not laugh, but the corners of their mouths discover flexibility. You settle near your small, stubborn flame, boots off, toes interrogated for mutiny. In the dark beyond the circle, you hear a few notes of a hillsong climb and then lean back down the scale like a path considering a descent. The night keeps its teeth to itself for once. Joke 3 arrives soft as a falling flake. If you make it to a warm tavern, you'll buy a round for every tribe in the Alps, on the strict condition that they ambush the bill instead of you. Before sleep, you glance upslope and watch the last 2 hostages. One of theirs, one of yours, trading bread under a shared cloak. You don't know if that's kindness, policy, or the oldest math of cold. You let the sight weigh down your eyelids. The mountain remains undecided about you. The Romans are the slowest shadow in history, and the locals are both warning and map. But for this hour, in this notch, you are a warm dot on a very white page, and the arrows sound like someone else's weather. You wake to ropes. Not the friendly kind, the kind that sway. The path has vanished into a cliff shrug, and in its place dangles a bridge of twisted fibers and logs that looks like it was designed for goats with good balance, not elephants with stage fright. You stare at the thing, planks missing, knots bulging like tumors, frost glazing every fiber. The wind plucks it like a harp, and it hums its own funeral tune. The officer ahead gestures briskly. Go! Not discuss, not debate. Go! The first man steps onto the ropes, toes spread wide, body bent low. The bridge groans. The man curses softly, moves another step, another. You shuffle forward, heart punching your ribs, palms damp inside frozen gloves. Joke 1 arrives as automatic defense. Welcome to Carthage's new amusement park ride, the Alpine Swing. Admission price, your sanity. The abyss below is an unlit mouth, clouds curling up like smoke from its throat. You grip the rope rail and try not to look down, but of course you do. It isn't distance you see, it's absence, a hole big enough to erase you without a trace. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's march truly faced rope bridges, or whether this detail was an invention of later dramatists. All you know is that this rope, this frost, and this yawning void are very persuasive storytellers. When the elephants approach, the bridge protests in a different key. The handlers blindfold them with cloaks, patting their trunks, whispering. One beast refuses, trumpets shrill, ears flapping, until its handler climbs onto its neck, murmuring a low rhythm like a lullaby. Together they step forward, the bridge screaming under each colossal stride. Men cling to the ropes, eyes squeezed shut, as if their own stillness will balance the giant. Quirky tidbit: a soldier mutters that in his village, bridges were tested by sending chickens first. If they survived, men followed. You look around and sigh. There are no chickens, only elephants. Halfway across, the ropes lurch. A plank snaps, tumbling into silence. The man ahead gasps, catching his balance. You feel the bridge sway under his fear and yours. The officer on the far side shouts encouragement, though his voice quavers too. Joke 2 sneaks in, desperate. If Carthage ever hosts Olympic gymnastics, you've already competed in the terrified shuffle. At last, your boots slap rock again. Your knees tremble, but you're solid, alive. You turn just in time to see an elephant step off, rumbling as though congratulating itself. The bridge still swings behind it, mocking you with the reminder that not all made it. The mule before you slipped, plunged, and was gone before the rope even finished its sigh. Camp that evening feels smaller, tighter. Fires burn bright, as if to outshine the memory of the abyss. Men trade stories of the bridge with wild gestures, some exaggerating, some muttering in silence. One soldier swears he heard voices below, as if the void itself spoke. Another claims he saw Roman helmets glinting far down, watching, waiting. Historians still argue whether Roman scouts really shadowed Hannibal that closely in the passes. Listening to the whispers, you're convinced the shadows never left. You curl into your cloak, still feeling the rope sway in your bones as though the bridge hasn't let you go. Joke 3 drifts across your thoughts. If the Alps ever build inns, they should skip beds and just rent hammocks. You've had enough practice dangling over nothing. You close your eyes, telling yourself the ground under you tonight is steady, even as the memory of the ropes creaks in your dreams. The night had nearly broken you, but morning begins with something strange, singing. Thin, cracked voices rise from the front of the column, wavering in the cold air like smoke from damp tinder. You blink, not sure if you're hearing men or mountain spirits. But then the melody steadies, carried by dozens, then hundreds. The sound knits itself into a fragile shield against silence, against fear. You shuffle forward, following the rhythm. It's not triumphant, more like a chant to remind lungs they still work. Carthaginians hum in their sharp consonants. Iberians join with rolling syllables, Numidians with clipped phrases that fall like hoofbeats. The languages braid, uneven but stubborn, and soon even your own lips move. You don't know the words, but you know the need. Mainstream fact: ancient armies often sang or chanted to keep pace, but Hannibal's host was a mosaic of tongues. Historians still argue whether shared songs were improvised chants or borrowed from one culture and repeated across the rest. Whatever the truth, you march today inside a sound too big for any one tribe. A Libyan soldier jokes mid-verse that you're all too frozen to carry tune, but the Alps don't mind off-key. Laughter ripples, blending with the chant. Quirky tidbit: one Iberian insists on snapping his sling stones together in rhythm, clack, 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 until the column steps fall into beat with him. You find yourself strangely grateful. Each crunch of snow feels less lonely with percussion. The elephants respond too. Their rumbles join, low and resonant, turning the song into something like an orchestra no one rehearsed. One trumpets briefly, startling everyone, then settles into a deep hum that shakes the path itself. Joke 1 drifts into your mind. Congratulations. You're in the Alps' first choir, featuring the tenor section of elephants. The sound matters. Raiders watching from cliffs hesitate. You see their shapes melt back into fog, perhaps deciding that an army which sings in snow is too stubborn to waste arrows on today. The Romans, if they hear, must puzzle at the echo, enemy voices threading the mountains where legions fear to march. When camp is set that night, the singing doesn't stop. Fires crackle, shadows dance, and the chants transform into something softer. Lullabies, work songs, even the occasional bawdy tune muffled by laughter. A Gaul, with a voice rough as gravel, croons about home meadows. An Iberian adds verses about olives that make everyone groan with hunger. But groaning is still life, still breath. You lie close to the fire, eyes half closed, and listen. The snow seems less oppressive when it carries music. Men sway, some clapping in slow rhythm, some tapping knives against helmets. The elephants oddly sway too, their bodies keeping time as if they understand. Historians still argue whether Hannibal encouraged these songs to bolster morale or if they rose naturally from desperate throats. You suspect both. Desperation births strange miracles, and tonight, music feels like bread. Joke 2 whispers in your thoughts as the fire spits. If survival depends on harmony, you'd better pray the mountain has forgiving ears. As the flames fade, the last song thins into a hum, then into silence. You pull your cloak close, still feeling the rhythm in your bones, as if the march continues even in sleep. Joke 3 arrives with drowsy warmth. When you return home, you'll tell everyone you once sang backup for elephants, and no one will believe you. You drift off, cocooned not just by wool, but by the memory of voices lifted together, fragile and defiant in the cold. White. That's the whole sentence the world writes today. White sky, white ground, white air. You march inside it the way a moth swims through milk, slow, bewildered, convinced there must be edges somewhere. The peaks vanish, the ridgelines dissolve, even the shadows give up as if the light has filed a complaint against geometry. You look down to confirm your legs still exist and watch your boots sink, lift, like a metronome that forgot the song. Time stops being hours and becomes the number of steps you can hold in your mouth. 50. Breathe. 50. Breathe. 50. Remember why? The column stretches, then blurs, then reappears as smudges of darker white. You stay close enough to touch the man ahead with your spear butt, partly to keep the line tight, partly to make sure you aren't walking toward a cliff disguised as continuity. The elephants become gray islands, drifting through a pale sea, each exhale throwing up a small storm. Somewhere to your left, a handler hums the night's choir under his breath, as if sound can knit distance where sight cannot. Mainstream fact to anchor the blankness. Ancient sources agree the crossing took place under early snows, with days of whiteout and drifts swallowing men and animals alike. The Alps in late autumn are a labyrinth of cornices, wind slabs, and hidden hollows even modern climbers respect. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's summit day sat in late October or early November, and whether he stood on the Traversette, the Clapier, or the Little St. Bernard when he pointed Italy-ward. From where you squint, the past is named today. Your eyes burn again, not with glare this time, but with sameness. The brain wants contrast. The Alps offer monotone. A veteran ties a strip of black cloth around his brow, a visor against uniform brightness. Another smears charcoal across his cheeks because a healer swore it teaches the face to see. You add a fingertip of soot beneath each eye and feel instantly more competent, which is at least half the point. Quirky tidbit, an Iberian counts his way through the fog by knotting a cord. 1 knot for 100 steps, a double knot for a prayer, a big knot for "I'm still here." He lets you touch the cord once as if proof has texture. The scouts pace like ghosts. Every so often one jabs his spears and the tip disappears, a small suck as the hole swallows the iron. The column veers. You follow, grateful for the way on snow can be edited with a gesture. The engineers do a different kind of writing. Little cairns of stone where the wind hasn't scoured the ridge, charcoal crosses on windward boulders, pine branch arrows pinned with ice to show where the ledge actually continues and where it merely pretends. Your job is simple: obey punctuation. Joke 1 squeezes out between breaths. Congratulations. You've joined the world's longest queue for nothing in particular, with excellent views of nothing on both sides. Hunger becomes stealthier, less a gnaw, and more an emptiness that copies your shape from inside. You chew snow when your mouth feels too dry to remember saliva, then scold yourself, then do it again because the mind is a terrible manager, when the horizon is soup. The elephants strip a stand of scrub down to sticks. The sound of chewing comforts you more than it should. A handler crumbles a pinch of salt onto a trunk. The beast lifts it delicately with two-fingered ridges and licks like a polite thunderstorm. You envy that dignity. The Romans are still behind you, a pressure you can't see, like a hand between your shoulder blades. Sometimes you convince yourself the chase has ended. Who could track anything in this? And then you find a single crisp footprint overlaying yours, treaded with a pattern you don't recognize. Could be one of your own, shifted by wind and imagination. Could be a scout who likes your stride. Could be a Roman who measured your pace and decided he also enjoys counting to 50. The uncertainty is its own hunter. A lull of wind gives you a soundscape. Nothing. Then, slowly, the army manufactures music. Sling stones clicking again, breath sinking to steps, a low elephant hum that tucks itself under your ribs. Someone at the front starts the chant from yesterday, and you feel your jaw loosen. The tune is flatter, as if even melody got cold, but it works. The line's rhythm becomes audible, and with it, purpose. You fall in on the third phrase without knowing the words. Historians still argue whether Hannibal rested 2 days near the summit to show his men the Po Valley, look, warmth exists, or whether that pause is a later writer's neat paragraph break. Today offers no grand vista, only close white. Yet, at one brief thinning, the clouds tear like damp paper, and you glimpse a sliver of down country. Darker land, the suggestion of slope, rumor of trees. The hole closes, and men swear they saw houses, orchards, baths, entire amphitheaters of steaming soup. You grin despite yourself. Jokes arrive more easily when hope gets a cameo. You pass a patch of wind-scoured ice that looks almost blue. The surface holds tiny trapped bubbles, like summer rain arrested mid-thought. A Carthaginian taps it with his spear and says, "Ancient air." He kneels and puts his ear to it, listening for voices. They say, "Keep moving." He smiles, and the group around him laughs, because even imaginary advice is better than silence. Quirky detail for your pocket. Another man scoops a palmful of that glassy ice and tucks it into a leather bag for luck, as if future thirst can be bribed in advance. Midday is a rumor. The light doesn't change, so much as admit it's tired. You eat the last of a fistful of barley paste you made at dawn. Cold now, crumbly as old vows. When you lick your fingers, you taste smoke, salt, and the memory of the goats you used to swear you'd never miss. Joke 2 yawns into the air. If Carthage opens a bakery when this is over, you'll recommend a specialty. Regret loaves, served plain. Exhaustion edits your senses. Rocks become pillows in the corner of your vision. Ledges rearrange themselves where you didn't leave them. The man in front performs a slow waltz. You're convinced he invented just to confuse you. Once, you step off the line and the ground drops a handspan without warning, and your entire body borrows a gasp an octave higher than you usually own. You shuffle back into the groove, chastened, ankle lecturing you for the rest of the hour. When the wind finally lifts its hand, the white brightens into pale gray. Shapes reappear, a spur of rock like a bowed head, a crooked pine with its own weather, the stuttering staircase of yesterday's switchbacks etched faintly on a slope. The relief feels enormous, out of proportion to the news. Congratulations, you can now see how far you still have to go. Someone claps once, no reason, just gratitude with a sound attached. Camp forms on a shelf you don't trust until you stomp 3 circles and watch none of them slide. Fires fight damp wood and win a few battles. In their glow, the world gains a second color, ember orange. Men unfreeze the day's jokes from their throats and pass them around like cups. A Gaul announces that tomorrow he will count to 50 in reverse, as a treat. A Numidian swears he will invent a 6th gear for legs. He will call it drag. You contribute a nod and a smile the fire understands. A cook presents you with something he calls soup, which is generous. It tastes like ideas. You drink it anyway, and feel it draw a faint line of heat down your center. A soldier produces a fig so dried it resembles philosophy. He splits it 5 ways. For a moment, your mouth remembers sweetness. The entire circle goes quiet in the same second, the primitive hush that attends any ceremony involving sugar. Joke 3 bows respectfully. If a single fig can silence an army, imagine what an orchard could do to empires. Before sleep, you look up. The sky is still mostly paper, but a few stars press through like thumbprints. You pick one and tell it, 50. You close your eyes and the white is still there, patient as a closed door. Tomorrow will open it or it won't. For now, your legs vibrate with miles you walked in place, and your breath settles to the slow count of a march that never ended, only paused to dream it was warm. The morning begins with a rumor. The descent is near. Word slinks along the column like a cat that may or may not exist. You're told the worst is behind you, that now the mountain will let you down gently, as if it cares. But when you peer forward, all you see is a slope so steep it looks like someone forgot to finish sculpting it. Your boots crunch close to the edge and your stomach learns new choreography, part dance, part rebellion. Below lies nothing but mist, curling in slow spirals, hiding whatever comes next. An engineer scratches his beard and mutters about switchbacks, as if a staircase carved into ice will solve everything. Mainstream fact. Ancient accounts mention that Hannibal's army struggled most on the descent, where snow, ice, and rock slides claim more lives than the climb. Historians still argue whether he blasted paths with fire and vinegar or relied on shovels, picks, and sheer stubbornness. Either way, you stand at the top of a chute that feels more like an insult than a road. The elephants hesitate too, their trunks probing the air. One shifts sideways, as if even tons of muscle are nervous about gravity's sense of humor. A handler smacks the ground with his staff and mutters reassurance no human could believe. The beast eventually moves, each step a sermon on caution. The men ahead start hacking footholds. Spears double as canes, shields as sleds, rope lines strung like fragile spider webs. Someone curses in 3 languages. Someone else apologizes to their mother for the entire expedition. Joke 1 thaws in your throat. Congratulations. You've joined history's largest game of don't slip or die. You try to descend, knees trembling, and the snow responds by sliding with you. It's not a fall, not yet. It's a long conversation between your boots and gravity. You clutch a rope, scrape down, slam into the man below, and both of you land in a pile that counts as progress. Quirky tidbit. One Iberian insists on carrying a chicken down in a basket strapped to his chest. He claims its clucks predict safe footing. The bird squawks furiously whenever the ground gives way, which means it hasn't stopped squawking since dawn. Oddly, you find the racket comforting. At least someone is more panicked than you. Halfway down, you reach a shelf where the engineers have set fires against a stubborn wall of rock. The flames lick, stones crack, and men pour vinegar over glowing fissures, the liquid hissing into vapor. The smell is acrid, like sour wine and burned hope. Historians still argue whether this vinegar trick ever truly happened, or if later writers simply enjoyed imagining alchemy on ice. Either way, you step around smoking rubble and feel slightly safer, if only because the alternative is admitting you aren't. A mule tumbles ahead of you, legs thrashing, cargo scattering like dice. It slams against a boulder and doesn't rise. Men rush to salvage what they can. Grain bags, leather sacks, a bundle of spears. The mule becomes part of the mountain, another frozen offering. You whisper a half prayer, half joke, may your next life be flatter. Further down, a Roman scout appears. No, not a living one, but a footprint pressed sharp into snow. The angle suggests a man turned suddenly, paused, and then retreated. The thought prickles. They are here too, watching, maybe amused at your slow collapse. Joke 2 limps out. If the Romans wait long enough, gravity will defeat you for free. The descent continues in fits. You crawl more than walk. Sometimes you slide deliberately, clutching the snow as if petting it will stop you. The air grows slightly warmer, but your bones are too occupied to notice. Men mutter about Italy lying somewhere under this fog. Italy with vineyards and valleys and roads. Someone swears he smells olives. You laugh, because if the Alps can conjure hallucinations, at least it chooses tasty ones. Camp that night is ragged. Fires flicker low, men slump like sacks, and even the elephants lean against each other, as though embarrassed to be tired. The chicken in the basket finally sleeps, head tucked under wing, the only creature convinced survival is certain. Historians still argue whether Hannibal encouraged his men with speeches about glory, or let exhaustion do the talking. You imagine him lifting his arm, pointing toward the unseen Po Valley, and saying something like, "Where? Not far." You want to believe him, because wanting is easier than measuring. Joke 3. Sneaks in before sleep. If you survive this descent, you're writing a stern letter to geography. You close your eyes with the sensation of sliding still in your knees, as though the mountain continues to tip you forward even while you rest. The morning cracks open with groans. Men, animals, wood, all sounding equally weary. Your body feels like it borrowed too many miles yesterday and still owes them back. The descent resumes anyway, because the Alps are not in the business of offering refunds. The slope today is less vertical, but more deceptive. Snow has thinned, giving way to mud, loose shale, and icy patches that wait like traps. You march carefully, each step a negotiation. Will the ground stay put, or will it betray you with a slide? Mainstream fact. Polybius, one of Hannibal's earliest historians, describes how rockfalls and landslides on the descent destroyed portions of the trail, forcing the army to rebuild paths under constant peril. Livy, writing later, adds extra flair, claiming elephants were lowered with ropes down sheer faces. Historians still argue which account is closer to truth, but either way, the story is unanimous. Going down was worse than going up. The first collapse comes mid-morning. A section of trail crumbles beneath a file of pack animals, sending them tumbling. The sound is sickening, bells jangling, hooves clattering, a final crash muffled by fog. Men leap aside, swearing, clutching rope lines tighter. The path left behind looks gnawed, like the mountain took a casual bite. Engineers hurry in with picks and axes, hacking a detour into the slope. You're ordered to carry stones, stacking them into a fragile shelf that will hold the next man, maybe. Quirky tidbit: one soldier uses slabs of pine bark as makeshift sledges, sliding rocks downhill faster than his companions can walk them. He cackles at each run, calling it alpine chariot racing. The absurdity lifts spirits for 5 minutes before the mud swallows his bark and his laughter. The elephants present their own challenge. Their massive feet churn the muddy path to porridge. Handlers yell, push, sing, and pray. One animal balks entirely, trumpeting so loudly the cliffs echo back, like a choir of ghosts mocking the army. Finally, ropes are looped around its belly and a dozen men haul, dragging the beast forward a few grudging yards. Historians still argue if this labor of men saving elephants or elephants saving men mattered more. Standing beside them, you know it doesn't matter. The mountain is watching all of you struggle and is equally unimpressed. Joke 1 staggers into the muck. At this point, Hannibal could rename the Alps Slopes of Broken Promises. Your stomach growls louder than your feet. Rations are thinner than the air. The grain paste you swallow tastes like wet cardboard, though you've never eaten cardboard and sincerely hope you never do. Men trade jokes about gourmet meals back home, fish stews, honey cakes, roasted lamb, have to torment themselves, have to remember why survival is worth the march. By midday, the fog begins to shred, revealing glimpses of valleys far below. The sudden sight of green, actual green, not white or gray, makes men stop mid-step and gape. Some cheer, some cry, some kneel. For you, it's like seeing another planet after being marooned on the moon. Italy is real. Italy has color. Italy has no interest in saving you quickly. Quirky note: one Balearic slinger claims he sees vineyards down there and swears he can smell fermenting wine. Another argues it's only pine sap. Historians still argue whether Hannibal paused to show his men Italy as motivation, or if that detail was written later to tidy the story. In your bones, you know the truth. Just seeing a strip of valley is enough to shove you another mile. Afternoon brings a rock slide, small but vicious. Pebbles rattle first, like applause, then boulders thunder down, Men scatter, shields raised. You press flat against the slope, heart thudding as a stone the size of a mule bounces past your boots. Dust fills your lungs, and when it clears, you're alive. Joke 2 hisses out. Nothing wakes you up like a mountain politely suggesting your funeral. Camp that night is lower, but not yet gentle. Fires burn hotter thanks to more wood, and someone produces a skin of sour wine that's been hiding for weeks. It tastes like vinegar, which you've already inhaled in fumes, but spirits rise anyway. The chicken in a basket survivor still clucks, now elevated to mascot status. Men toss it crumbs as though feeding a prophet. Joke 3 slips into the circle. Maybe the chicken is Hannibal's real secret weapon, here to terrify Rome with relentless optimism. You fall asleep with the valley glowing faintly below, promising a future that seems almost reachable, though the mountain hasn't finished teaching you its final lessons. The first sound is small, like a cat exhaling. A sigh slips out of the cornice above the trail, so soft you'd miss it if your nerves weren't tuned like harp strings. Then the mountain clears its throat, snow sloughs in a glittering sheet, and the men ahead start moving faster without being told. A scout throws up his hand, flat palm, palm down, the sign that means do not shout. Your own breath suddenly feels loud, even your heartbeat seems like a hammer you should put down. The slope to your right bulges white and innocent. The engineers gesture you along the safer line, tighter to the cliff, over the wind-scoured patches where rock shows through like ribs. The column compresses until you can smell the leather of the man's belt in front of you. Somewhere behind, an elephant snorts, uneasy, and the sound is too big for this narrow ledge. Quiet, a handler whispers, which is a very funny thing to say to 6 tons of opinion. A hollow whomp rolls across the ridge, a drumbeat under your feet. The snow surface fractures with delicate cracks that race like lightning, and the slope lets go. It does not tiptoe, it heaves itself alive. A white tide pours away, first silky, then roaring, then a freight train of ice blocks and shattered crust. You are already running, not the fast kind, the clever kind. Small steps, weight low, eyes on the engineer's pick marks. You focus on the rhythm of your feet and the space the size of a shield just ahead, and you do not look at the great white body gathering speed to your right. Mainstream fact for the part of your brain that still reads. Ancient sources, especially Polybius, describe storms and slides that broke roads, buried men, and forced rebuilding under fire and ice. Modern climbers have mapped slab and loose snow avalanches on the likely passes. The Alps love this trick when wind has loaded lee slopes after early storms. Historians still argue whether specific disasters in Livy were one event told twice, or many events blended into theater, but your legs do not care which citation style the mountain prefers. The first wave pours past below you, dragging saplings like grass. The air changes, warm for a blink, then shock cold, pressure slamming your ears as if a giant just clapped. Powder explodes into the path, blinding you with a chalky veil. Someone to your left goes down. You grab his cloak and yank, and the two of you stumble together into a low pocket behind a knob of rock. The avalanche's sound climbs to a pitch that lives between hearing and feeling, an animal made of snow, all throat. Joke 1 arrives mostly to keep your teeth from chattering. Congratulations, you're attending the Alps' loudest concert, featuring the hit single Gravity Remastered. The officers wave, hands chopping, keep moving, keep low, keep the line intact. Men step the way cats do on polished floors, fast and careful. A Numidian scout taps the snow surface with his spear every third stride, reading harmonics like a drummer checking a skin. Soft here, he hisses, and the line slides up 3 paces toward rock without discussion. The elephants bunch. One handler blindfolds his beast with a cloak, better no horizon than the wrong one, and clicks his tongue. The animal follows that sound like a thread. Quirky tidbit. The Balearic slingers carry little wooden whistles on cords, and in storms like this, blow them at intervals so the men behind can follow tone when sight fails. The whistles trill now, thin birds against thunder, and you love them with a gratitude usually reserved for blankets and friends. A second slope goes, this one above the trail. The crown line rips like a zipper. Down! Someone hisses, and you and 50 men fold into the hillside, planting fists, burying fingers, faces to snow. The slide fans out in a white skirt, jumps the path, and spends itself in the gully beyond with a groan of boulders tumbling under cream. You spit ice, blink grit, and discover your mouth tastes like limestone, an old fear. When you push up, your gloves are coated with sticky snow that clings like dough. You rub it on rock to free your fingers and vow to never complain about kitchen work again. You pass a switchback that no longer exists. In its place yawns a fresh scarp where the avalanche chewed the trail to the bone. Engineers move like surgeons, picks biting, axes chopping steps into the raw face. Bundles of brush appear from nowhere, flung down to spread the weight. Men stamp them into a mat, pine needles crackling. Somewhere behind, a handler coaxes an elephant to kneel so a dozen men can use its shoulder as a platform to reach a ledge. The beast rumbles, insulted and saintly at once, as if to say, I will allow this, but take better notes about gravity next time. Vinegar? A young soldier pants, eyeing the rock. An older man snorts. Save it for the wine, he says, and pours warm water instead. Steam ghosts up, theatrical but useless. The real work is bite by bite, step by icy step. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's men truly cracked stone with heat and acid, or whether that scene is literature's favorite party trick. Today, you watch boots carve facts where debates fear to tread. The path reappears one soldier at a time. You cross the cut one breath long, and feel the emptiness below tug at your ankles like a petulant child. On the far side, a gust tears the powder loose from the cliffs and throws it over you in a white curtain. For a heartbeat, you can't tell up from down. Your inner ear shrieks. Your hand flies out and finds a rope line, and you love that scratchy hemp with a devotion bards should sing about. Joke 2 tumbles out as a cough. On future maps, you'll label this spot Here Be Laundry because the mountain is committed to shaking you out to dry. The avalanche's voice fades to a long, sulky mutter. Snow dust hangs like incense in a ruined chapel. You count heads without admitting you're counting. Too many gaps. Men call names, answers come late, or not at all. A mule appears half buried up to its withers, eyes rolled white. 4 men dig like dogs and pull it free, and the animal totters away with the dignity of a clerk who has fallen down the office stairs and insists he meant to. You come to a lee hollow, a place the wind forgot about, and the officers wave you into a tight coil. Not a full camp, only a breath held together. Fires are forbidden, the slope above still sulks, and heat can whisper to snow in unhelpful ways. You eat cold paste with colder fingers and listen to the mountain's after-talk. Little crumps and sighs as the slab settles. A Gaul near you threads a red cord through his cloak and mutters that the color distracts avalanche spirits. You refrain from asking what he plans to distract them from. Quirky superstition is still oxygen. Mainstream reminder as your pulse calms. Later, down in Italy, people will argue how many you lost. Men, horses, elephants, to weather versus war. Numbers slide like snow and ink. Historians still argue whether the crossing cost a third, half, more. The reliable truth is that the Alps collect their toll and keep the receipt. When the officers finally release you, the column flows like a careful river. The slope on your right gleams, smooth, clean, as if it never tried to murder you. Joke 3 arrives with weary courtesy. Nice of the mountain to tidy up after the attempt. Afternoon bruises into evening. You find a shelf where the wind spent itself earlier and left you a pocket of comparative peace. Fires spark at last, small and reverent. The elephants stand rump to, making a wind wall. Handlers check ankles, rub ears, murmur the old chest notes until trunks loosen and heads droop. You hold your hands to a stingy flame and feel heat climb into your bones like a patient climber. When you close your eyes, the avalanche still moves behind your lids. White river, white roar, the falling that keeps falling even after it stops. You breathe slow and deep until your ribs tell your ears it's over. For tonight anyway. Tomorrow the mountain will try new music. You will count your steps and your jokes and your friends and sing low enough not to wake the snow. At first you think the morning is ordinary. The kind of ordinary the Alps allow, which is to say cruel, bright, and very white. Then the absence arrives. A gap where a bulk should be. A silence where a bass note used to hum in your bones. You count without admitting you're counting. Harnesses, handlers, the familiar ridge of a shoulder moving like a slow hill, and then you know. There's only one. The last elephant stands alone, a gray monolith surfacing from the snow, while the rest of the herd exists only as footprints and stories. He is frosted at the edges, eyelashes rhymed, breath coiling in a warm rope that vanishes quickly. His ear flicks, cracking a little with a sound like parchment. A handler strokes his trunk, two palms, up and down, the way you calm a skittish horse, except this horse could carry a small house. The handler whispers the same chest notes you've been hearing for days, and the elephant answers with a low vibration that steadies your knees. The army keeps its distance for a heartbeat, as if paying respects, then trickles forward until men and mule and this last giant share a single breath. You step into the prints he leaves, each pad imprint a shallow basin of refuge wide enough to swallow your foot and some of your fear. Snow that would resist your weight is already persuaded by his. The column settles into this new rhythm. Elephant, echo, giant, chorus. One shadow that the rest of you wear like a cloak. Mainstream fact to hang on to. Ancient writers remembered that at least one elephant reached Italy. Livy names a survivor called Surus, the Syrian, said to have borne Hannibal later in the campaign, and the beast terrified Roman horses at the Battle of the Trebia soon after the crossing. Historians still argue whether Surus truly was Syrian, African, or simply a nickname minted by rumor, whether a platform or howdah crowned his back, whether one elephant or a handful staggered out of the Alps at all. The tale changes with the teller. What doesn't change is how it feels to walk behind a living banner that insists the impossible is currently happening. Handlers fuss over the last giant like nervous uncles. One warms flat stones at the fire and slides them into a blanket belt under the belly. The old hearth trick scaled up to cathedral size. Another rubs a little oil into cracked ankles. A third ties two tiny bells to a strap, not for ceremony but for weather. In whiteouts, he says, you follow the music. Quirky tidbit. He swears wolves dislike bells, that the sound makes them remember shepherds and choose different suppers. You nod as if you've confirmed it in peer-reviewed journals. The march begins, and you feel the day click into place. The elephant breaks trail through a drifted bowl that would have turned men into slow furniture. He leans into the slope, trunk skimming ahead like a blind man's cane, testing the crust with wise taps. You and the men around you learn to read his body's grammar. The sway that means step shallow, the pause that means ledge, the brief stamp that translates as this will hold. Joke one wanders up, polite as a cough. You signed on as prey, but congratulations, you've been promoted to a footnote following a paragraph. The sun sharpens, a dagger bright enough to add teeth to the glare. The last elephant becomes a moving eclipse. Stand close enough and his shadow softens the knives in the light. You angle yourself to catch that shade when you can, like stealing sips from a stranger's water skin. The handler notices and smiles without malice. The mountain is large enough to share small mercies. At a narrow kink in the path, the elephant hesitates. The ledge ahead is scraped to glass. One bad angle and 6 tons become a landslide with opinions. The handler blindfolds him with a cloak, taps a rhythm against the strap, and clicks. You hold your breath. The giant steps, the bridge of his spine flexing, 1 foot down, another, then he's across, the cloak lifted, the world allowed to exist again. The men behind release breath in a ragged chord that could be mistaken for a prayer if anyone were naming it aloud. Stories collect around the last survivor as heat collects in cupped hands. A Gaul insists he saw coins in Spain with elephants stamped on them. Prophecy minted before your boots touched alpine snow. An Iberian says Surus had 1 broken tusk and wore a bright cloth on his back so Hannibal could see above men and mist. A Carthaginian with a scar like punctuation across his cheek says the general rode only when he must and walked when he could, which is the kind of story that makes feet feel less alone. Historians still argue whether Hannibal used an elephant as a vantage during operations near the Po, or mostly as a moving standard to steady nerve. You listen and add the details to your pocket museum next to the fungus coal and the chicken rumor and the ghosts you pretended not to see. On a long white slope, the elephant slows, then stops. The handler tilts his head and you hear it too. A trickle under the crust, a thin buried stream whispering about cracks and bad footing. The column detours left, hugging rock, and 5 minutes later a cornice slumps where you would have been. You pat the nearest boulder with exaggerated gratitude and murmur to it that it did very well pretending to be a path. The man next to you nods solemnly, as if to second the compliment. Hunger accompanies the procession the way a drum does a march. The beast chews twigs when it finds them, snaps a branch the thickness of your wrist as though correcting a minor misunderstanding, and eats the correction. The sound warms you more than your scrap of barley paste. After a while, the handler sprinkles a pinch of salt across his palm, and the trunk samples it delicately, the tip two-fingering the crystals like a connoisseur. You think of the night you burned dung for fuel and smile at the full circle of uses. The mountain is very clear about economies. A Roman scout might be watching from some wrinkle of cliff. If he is, you hope he carries home a story with teeth. They still have one. You picture a centurion frowning at that tale, doing the arithmetic of morale, deciding whether to hurry or let the road handle you. Joke two pads in, as tired and friendly as a camp dog. If morale were a ration, today you'd be eating seconds, light on calories, heavy on flavor. Sir, by late light the slope slants down at last, into a scoop of calmer air. Camp looms faster than you thought possible. Men move with the urgency of people briefly allowed to be less afraid. The last elephant anchors the windward side, his bulk breaking the worst of it. The handler loosens the girth strap, checks the skin at the elbows, fingers the little bells and smiles to hear them alive. He slides a palm tree charm from a tusk thong, taps it, and presses it to his own heart. You look away to give the moment walls. Men gather in a half circle, uninvited and unshoed. Someone hums one of the walking songs. A few bars in, the elephant answers with a low, not quite note that rearranges your insides. You all laugh, not because it's funny, but because relief sounds like that. A Balearic slinger raises a cup of sour wine and toasts in accents from three coasts. You raise yours too. It tastes like vinegar, smoke, and being almost somewhere. Mainstream reminder before sleep settles. Later histories will count and recount losses. We'll weigh genius against geography. We'll polish names until they shine. Historians still argue whether the elephant in those lines is a single hero or a chorus reduced to one voice. You know, the one that's here tonight, warm and breathing, throwing a shadow you can share. Joke 3 curls around you as you lie down in the lee of that moving hill. When you finally reach a proper city, you'll ask the innkeeper for a room with a view of one elephant, please, because you've learned the view itself can be a blanket. The last thing you hear before sleep elbows you gently is the small bell's tremble, a polite star hung 2 feet off the ground, keeping time for a giant who refuses to go out. You count the beats, slow and even, and for once the mountain does not interrupt. The descent twists again, dropping into a ravine where cliffs rise like frozen jaws. You shuffle along, boots sliding on scree, hands brushing stone that flakes into powder. Behind you, the last elephant lowers his head to clear an overhang, the sound of hide against rock like parchment being rubbed between fingers. You cannot decide if his persistence reassures you or only reminds you how improbable survival still is. The ravine narrows, funneling snowmelt into icy ribbons that braid across the path. Crossing them numbs your ankles in seconds, and you find yourself hopping from rock to rock, muttering that you never signed up to be a mountain goat. Someone behind you jokes that Carthage should start paying hazard wages, though no one laughs loudly enough to tempt an avalanche. Mainstream fact. Polybius reports that Hannibal lost many of his animals during the descent. Casualties of landslides and exhaustion rather than combat. Livy, writing later, adds embellishments about rope bridges and elephants sliding down slopes like enormous sledges. Historians still argue whether these accounts reflect competing eyewitnesses or literary dramatization. Either way, you know the slope is happy to play both roles, stage and executioner. Halfway down, a fresh obstacle, a section of trail scoured away by an old rockfall. Below lies a sheer drop, vanishing into mist. Engineers step forward, their tools clinking like cautious bells. They anchor logs against the slope, layering stones, creating a new ledge barely wide enough for a mule. Quirky tidbit. One soldier lays pine branches across the path to create traction, swearing it's an old Iberian trick. He slides once, catches himself, then insists the trick still works, just not on Thursdays. The elephant refuses at first, trunk swinging in agitation. His handler blindfolds him again, tapping a soft rhythm against his flank. The great body sways, then commits. You stand pressed into the rock wall, breath caught, as 6 tons of uncertainty tiptoe past you. Joke one arrives shaky but needed. If elephants can tightrope walk, you have no excuse for tripping on your own boots. Once across, you all exhale like punctured wineskins. The path broadens briefly, and sunlight pierces the ravine in shafts so sharp you'd swear you could lean on them. You see valleys opening far below, green, gold, actual life painted beyond reach. Some men weep, others squint as if offended. You only stare, trying to memorize the color green before the mountain takes it away again. By late day, the descent grows crueler. Mud replaces snow, slick and treacherous. Mules stumble, men curse softly. A pack slides away into silence. You cling to a rope line, knuckles white. One soldier, trying to lighten spirits, starts reciting recipes. Fish stew, honey cakes, roasted goat. You laugh despite yourself, though your stomach knots with hunger. Joke 2 sneaks in. Apparently, starvation improves your imagination more than any poet's workshop. Camp that night is lower still, but the air is no kinder. Wind snakes through cracks, carrying the groan of the mountain. Fires flare, then die quickly. The last elephant curls into himself, trunk folded, steam rising from his body like a private hearth. Men huddle nearby, treating him as both companion and fortress. Someone mutters that perhaps Rome itself will crumble if this giant sets foot on Italian soil. Historians still argue whether fear of elephants in battle was exaggerated or genuine, but sitting here, you'd wager any Roman scout would think twice. As you drift towards sleep, you count the day's absurdities. Goats' tricks, blindfolded giants, invisible bridges. The mountain remains undefeated, but you're still here, clinging by fingernails. Joke 3 sighs through your lips before you close your eyes. If Hannibal ever writes a travel guide, you're skipping the Alps chapter. The mountain seems determined to make its farewell as theatrical as possible. Morning opens with a haze that hides distance, every cliff dissolving into gauze, every sound muffled as if the world has been wrapped in wool. You stumble awake, boots stiff with frost, and realize your first task is simply persuading your legs to belong to you again. The elephant stands nearby, enormous but blurred, like a god someone has half erased with a damp sponge. His low rumble cuts through the fog, and you cling to it the way sailors cling to lighthouse bells. The trail today is mercifully downward, though mercy in the Alps is relative. Each step is either mud that grabs your feet like needy hands, or gravel that slides away like someone pulling a rug. You inch, you brace, you mutter. Ahead, engineers mark spots with pine boughs, warning of half-buried holes. Quirky tidbit. One Iberian claims he can smell safer ground, says he was raised where goats trained him in mountain logic. You chuckle and tell him you'll hire his nostrils if they survive to flatter Roman vineyards. Mainstream fact. Ancient sources record Hannibal's descent as far costlier than his ascent. Thousands of men, horses, and pack animals perished in the mud and rock. Historians still argue whether the numbers are exaggerated to inflate the general's genius or understated to avoid admitting the Alps nearly destroyed him. Either way, trudging downward, you feel like a survivor of both miracle and accident. At a sharp bend, the path ends in a drop carved by centuries of meltwater. Engineers fashion a crude switchback by hammering stakes and weaving branches. It looks like a ladder made by children. The elephant waits, shifting his weight, and when his turn comes, he lowers his head and follows, each step bending wood with the groan of condemned furniture. You flatten yourself to the wall, whispering apologies to your own heartbeat. Joke 1 surfaces. The Alps are less a mountain range and more a sadistic carpenter testing how much weight a plank can hold. When the fog lifts suddenly, you see valleys sprawling below, green fields, tidy shapes of villages, the faint shimmer of rivers coiling like silver snakes. The entire army pauses. For the first time in weeks, you can imagine warmth, harvests, even roofs that don't collapse under snow. A cheer rises, weak but genuine. You clap your numb hands and feel like you've just rediscovered applause. The descent sharpens again, this time through a field of boulders tumbled like dice thrown by an impatient god. Men pick paths, sliding between stone faces, while the elephant threads carefully, trunk feeling ahead, shoulders scraping granite. His handler hums constantly, a one-note lullaby. You find yourself humming too, an accidental duet. Joke 2 tiptoes in. Congratulations, you're now part of the strangest choir in military history. 200 exhausted men and one giant baritone. By late afternoon, the air thickens, warmer, damper. Snow is gone, replaced by slush and mud. Grass pushes up in tufts. You kneel and touch it, absurdly grateful for something that doesn't hurt. A few soldiers collapse to kiss the ground, others pretend not to watch. You simply sigh, because sighing takes less energy than joy. Camp that night feels different. Fires burn steadier. Meat sizzles faintly on spits, the smell making your stomach remember hope. A Carthaginian officer mutters that Rome is only weeks away. You try to picture it, but your imagination stalls at the thought of flat roads and dry boots. Historians still argue whether Hannibal's crossing was strategic brilliance or reckless gamble, but lying there, you know it was also theater. Grand, ruinous, unforgettable. As darkness folds in, the last elephant shifts, bells tinkling, and the sound slides into your bones like a lullaby. Joke 3 leaves your lips tired but pleased. When you finally sleep in a bed again, you'll ask for background noise set to elephant breathing in E-flat. You descend into air that finally smells like something besides ice. It's damp with leaf rot and wood smoke, a hint of animals. Even a sweetness you trust must be mud pretending to be fruit. The fog slackens its grip and the world arranges itself into colors again. Moss dark in crevices, trunks striped with lichen, a rivulet scribbling silver through stones. Somewhere not far off, a bell rings, small, bright, a cow maybe, and the sound is so domestic you almost cry. You have been living in a world without corners. Suddenly there are fences. The last elephant moves ahead, less a miracle now than a companion with large opinions. The bells on his strap give that polite tremble when his foot finds a hollow, and the whole column adjusts, like dancers following a lead they didn't rehearse. You are not safe. No one is safe. But you can imagine safety, which is more dangerous and more necessary than any ladder the engineers ever tied into the cliff. You lift your eyes and see it at last. Not the Po Valley entire, not the map in a historian's hand, but the mouth of it. Fields, hedges, the idea of roads heading toward places with names. You breathe, and for the first time in weeks, the breath feels like it belongs to a body that might grow older on purpose. Mainstream fact. Not for bragging rights, but for the soft authority of context. In 218 BCE, after weeks of climbing, sliding, bleeding, and bargaining with stone, Hannibal led a reduced but living army down into northern Italy, gathered Gallic allies among the Insubres and Boii, and soon faced Rome at the Trebia in winter's teeth. Historians still argue whether your crossing took the Traversette or the Little Saint. Bernard. Whether you lost a third or half, whether Surs was a single legend or a chorus condensed to a name. You don't know, and you don't need to. You know what snow sounds like when it decides to move. You know what mud asks in exchange for letting a foot go. A farmer appears on a distant slope, a figure with a hoe over one shoulder, frozen between fear and curiosity as an army unspools across the ridgeline above his field. He raises a hand. Someone in your column raises one back. It is nothing and it is everything. A gesture shaped like, "We're not ghosts." So a quirky tidbit to tuck away with your other talismans. A Gaul beside you swears that in these hills, Locals bake chestnut flour into a cake as firm as a promise and as sweet as a truce. He says the name and you promptly forget it, but your mouth remembers the shape of sweetness, and that is enough to keep your boots honest. The path crosses a creek and you risk a hand into the current. The cold is still alpine, but it is the cold of water that intends to be river, not prison. You splash your face and blink at the shock, and it occurs to you that this is the first time you've washed your own fear off with anything faster than melted snow. Joke 1. Gentle, arrives with a drip from your chin. Congratulations, you are now officially downgraded from icicle to wet person. The elephant lingers at the ford, trunk deep, drawing water up and letting it fall in a silver sheet over his tusk, as if blessing the day for remembering what days are. The handler pats his neck and murmurs a word you guess means enough, which is a word the mountain never learned to say. You follow the wet prints downstream, and the trail widens into something that once pretended to be a road. Ruts. Stones placed by hands. Your feet notice before you do. They stop lifting as high, trusting earth to keep some of its agreements. Men begin to speak of the future in complete sentences. Not just bread, but bread with oil. Not just a roof, but a roof that complains when the rain tries impolite angles. Romans remain a gravity in your spine, but they are a human gravity now. The mountain has de-escalated from God to background character. You are prey, yes, but prey with a plan and an address. Joke 2 wanders out, a little proud of itself. On your next enlistment form, you'll list your special skill as advanced walking under difficult opinions. At a bend, the engineers stop building the world long enough to build a little moment. One props his pick against a stump and points, not to glory exactly, but to farmland. A smear of smoke from a hamlet, a twist of river you can follow without a guide spear tapping for harmonics. The officer beside him says something like, "There," and you understand it the way your body understands warmth. It's not a speech. It doesn't need to be. You've had enough speeches. From wind, from wolves, from white. This one is made of distance and the permission to shorten it. The column halts and redistributes its breath. A mule brays like a door in need of oil, and is for once funny instead of tragic. Someone produces a stub of fig saved far beyond reason, slices it into mean fractions, and hands you one. It tastes like an argument with winter that you finally win. The last elephant curls his trunk and flicks it against the handler's shoulder. An impatient tap you decide to interpret as, "Carry on." You do. You are very obedient when the future is the one giving orders. Mainstream memory nudges again. Weeks from now, lakes will freeze, and men will wade a river at Trebia up to their chests. Months from now, a fog will lift at Lake Trasimene, and Romans will learn new definitions for the word ambush. Historians still argue whether Hannibal should have turned his winter into siegecraft or diplomacy instead of battles, but those arguments are for tables with bread. Today's table is a rock with a taste of fig on it, and your name returning to your voice. You look back once, one time only, and see what you did not die in. The past has already begun to erase your footprints. If you fell asleep now and woke in a year, you might believe you dreamed it. You will spend a lifetime wondering whether you crossed a mountain or a story that agreed to let you borrow its shape. Joke 3, drowsy but pleased with itself. On the far side of all this, when someone asks your favorite view, you'll say down. The line leans forward and so do you. The bells give a small domestic chime. For the first time since goats and ghosts and vinegar and ropes became verbs, you consider sleep as a choice rather than a collapse. You are the last page turning itself. You are the breath that arrives before your next name. Set it down now. The spear, the day, the rhythm. Let the slope loosen behind your eyelids until it is only a gentle rounded hill, soft as a folded blanket. The white that once shouted becomes a pale glow, even, quiet, like a curtain drawn over a window you no longer need to watch. The bells from the elephant soften into distant wind chimes, steady, slow, marking time that lengthens between heartbeats. In, and the air is warm. Out, and the road shortens all by itself. You are not counting steps anymore. Steps count you, carefully, approvingly, the way a kind librarian counts returned books. Your boots rest by a door that stays open. Somewhere nearby, water keeps its small promise, slipping over stones, silver becoming sleep. Firelight, low and amber, paints the inside of your cloak with a calm the mountain couldn't argue down. Shapes that used to leer, the cliff, the cornice, the rope, fade into silhouettes of trees, of roofs, of fields that wait without urgency. Breathe as if the valley has already reached you. Shoulders loosen, jaw loosens, hands open, fingers uncurling from imaginary rails. If any noise remains, the old avalanche rumble, the wolf's half-remembered song, let it move farther away, step by step, until it is only weather happening to some other night. The last elephant turns once, a slow, friendly circle, then settles. His breath becomes a tide you can follow without trying. In, out, in, out. Let hunger turn into the simple, pleasant hollow of a bed waiting to be filled by your weight. Let fear turn into the ordinary caution that tucks the blanket up one more inch. Let the chase, Romans, shadows, time, pause politely on the far side of a door they promised not to open. You have crossed what you needed to cross. The rest can wait until morning.